Good morning, everyone. I think we're a little bit delayed on that, so unless that Yuma County seal is always there. This is the meeting notice for the regular session of the Yuma County Board of Supervisors. We'll also be sitting as all special taxing districts. This is the October 19, 2020, 9 a.m. meeting. And board members can attend either in person or by telephone or remotely by via electronic conferencing. We've got everybody here, I think, today. So the first item in the agenda is the call to order, which I just done. And the next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Would everybody please stand up and follow us? Supervisor McLeod, you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Please join me. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First item in the agenda is call to the public. Call to the public is held for the public's benefit to allow individuals to address issues within the board's jurisdiction. Board members may not discuss items that are not specifically identified in the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to Arizona revised statutes, action taken as a result of public comments will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to criticism, or scheduling the matter for further discussion and a decision at a future date. See, anyone who's concerned about COVID-19 and does not want to be put into an open setting can submit an email to call to the public statement at publiccomment@yumacountyaz.gov. These emails, forms of public comment will be accepted until 8 a.m. the morning of the meeting. Our public comments will be read out loud during the Yuma County Board of Supervisors meeting, which starts at 9. So I'm opening this item to the public. Is there anyone in the public that wants to address the board and any issues that aren't in the agenda? Any comments received through the email? Now, I'm going to leave the call to the public item open throughout the meeting in case somebody just comes in late or wants to address us in some issue that isn't in the agenda. We do that to make it easy for people who want to participate in the meeting and didn't get a chance or showed up a little late. So, okay, we're going to move on then to the next item, which is the presentation, proclamation, and appointment. And during this segment of the agenda, board members may discuss the presentations and proclamations and may announce appointments to the Yuma County Planning and Zoning Commission and the Yuma County Board of Adjustment. There will be no legal action taken. And normally this is the item in the agenda where members can make appointments, if any, to the Board of Adjustments, to the Planning and Zoning Commission. I don't think we have any appointments this morning, do we? We have no openings. If not, then I'll move on to the item number 1 on this particular section of the agenda, which is presentations of the county line by Yuma 77, the Yuma County Government Channel. Are we ready?
Our County Health District teamed up with Arizona Western College to hold a large-scale COVID-19 saliva testing event. Early voting has begun. We'll tell you what to expect if you plan on voting at one of our vote centers. And our Information Technology Services Department has some opportunities that will help you become cyber smart. These stories and more, this is your County Line. You may think that since the governor has allowed many businesses and organizations to begin opening, that maybe we don't need to worry about protocols. But that couldn't be further from the truth. We must continue to keep a close eye on COVID numbers. It's one of the main reasons the Yuma County Health District is holding large-scale testing opportunities in different parts of the county. Saturday, the County Health District teamed up with AWC to provide special saliva testing produced by the biomedical research team at ASU.
We think that the ASU saliva is just so much more comfortable. You sit in your car, there's no pain. It's a fast and easy process, and people don't mind having that knowledge of whether or not they're positive.
The Welton Public Library will be the next opportunity for those in Yuma County to be tested. On Saturday, October 24th, from 8 a.m. to noon, free saliva testing to those who register. Visit yumacountyaz.gov, then follow the link to the COVID-19 update page. You'll find the instructions and QR code to register. Almost everyone realizes Election Day is approaching fast. It's already clear from the early voting the turnout will be heavy, and with so much information circulating, we want to give registered voters an idea of what to expect at our vote centers on November 3rd. When entering the vote center, registered voters will present their photo identification or other combination of valid identifying documents to a poll worker to be checked in to vote. This is where voters choose to vote using either an electronic ballot marking device or a paper ballot. Voters will go to an open electronic ballot marking machine or a private booth to vote a paper ballot. Once the voter has made their choice, they will insert their completed ballot into the tabulator before leaving the vote center. COVID-19 precautions are still in place, so please wear a face covering or mask, maintain social distancing of 6 feet, and utilize the hand sanitizing stations that will be available.
At specific intervals throughout Election Day, we will be measuring wait times and sharing that information on the county's social media pages as well as on the county's website. And this is to help voters decide where the best location would be for them to vote.
Early voting is happening now at our downtown Yuma location through Friday, October 30th. Or you can visit the Election Services website for a full list of Election Day vote center locations. Your personal security when it comes to data should be important to you. The same goes for your county government, where data is under attack nearly every day by cybercriminals. Fortunately for us, we have our Information Technology Services Department. This month, they're drawing attention to October as Cybersecurity Awareness Month. The Information Technology Services staff can help you and your family surf the internet more safely. Your online identity, financial fraud, stalking, bullying, hacking, email spoofing, and so much more can be in danger when you're online.
The most basic way to safeguard your technologies is having a strong password. And a strong password doesn't necessarily have to be a password that only a robot would be able to decipher. Traditionally, that used to be the go-to, but now we've seen that as long as you have a password that is long and is usually a phrase that's only known to you, that really helps out a lot. Of course, with that being said, the other item that we usually remind everybody is that don't use your password, the same password across every single platform that you have.
Our cyber team have set up some great opportunities for you and your family to learn how to be cyber smart. There are a number of free online trainings for you and your family. Just visit yumacountyaz.gov and find our ITS department.
Hi, I'm Mary, and this is your Health Watch. With the increase in earthquake activity in recent months, the Yuma County Public Health Emergency Preparedness Team would like to remind each of you the importance of creating a family emergency communication plan. Before a disaster strikes, have a list of emergency contacts, including fire, police, ambulance, etc., in your cell phone and near your home phone. Agree on a family meeting place both in your neighborhood and out of town. Program ICE in case of emergency numbers into your phone and family members' phones. If someone is injured, emergency personnel can use these numbers to notify family and friends. Prepare a family contact sheet with the names, addresses, and phone numbers of important contacts. Include an out-of-town contact for family members to get in touch with when they are unable to contact other family members. Often during disasters, it's easier to make long-distance calls than local calls. Create a contact card for each member of the family. Keep these cards in a purse, wallet, or child's backpack. Include an emergency contact name and number, an out-of-town contact name and number, a neighborhood meeting place, and any other important information. Be sure every family member has emergency phone numbers and a cell phone. Teach children how and when to call 911 for help. Make sure everyone in your family knows how to send a text message. Texts can often get around network disruptions when phone calls cannot. For additional information on how your family can be better prepared for disasters, please contact the Yuma County Emergency Preparedness Team at 928-373-4625 or visit ready.gov. That is all for now. Until next time, stay healthy, Yuma.
Before we go, here's a few updates about the surplus auction. The Yuma County Surplus Auction will be back starting at 3 p.m. Friday, October 30th. On that day, you'll be able to log on to publicsurplus.com and bid on many items like computers, furniture, and electronics. The auction will continue until November 13th. We'd like to thank you for joining us for this County Line. If you'd like to watch past episodes, log on to yumacountyaz.gov/VOD. And remember, you can join us live on Facebook. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you for that. The lights are. So there's some seats up in the front. I promise not to call on you for any questions. It's not like going to school, and that never changes. My daughter's the same way. She likes to sit in the back. I don't get it. All right. We'll move on to the next item in the agenda, which is the proclamation of October 2020 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We do have a couple of individuals that are here to receive that proclamation. I'll introduce them a little later. But this time I'll have Supervisor Pancrase read the proclamation.
Thank you, Chairman Reyes. Proclamation proclaiming October 2020 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Whereas the crime of domestic violence violates an individual's privacy and dignity, security, and humanity due to systematic use of physical, emotional, sexual, psychological, and economic control and/or abuse, including abuse to children and the elderly, and the problems of domestic violence are not confined to any group of people, but cut across all economic, racial, and societal barriers. And whereas when a family member is abused, it can have a long-term damaging effect on the victims that also leave a mark on family, friends, and the community at large. And whereas families are indispensable to a stable society, and they should be a source of support to instill responsibility and values in the next generation. And whereas it is important to recognize the compassion and dedication of the individuals who provide services to victims of domestic violence and work to increase public understanding of this significant problem. And whereas Domestic Violence Awareness Month provides an opportunity for citizens to learn more about preventing domestic violence and to show support for the numerous organizations and individuals who provide critical advocacy services and assistance to victims. I therefore, Marco A. Tony Reyes, Chairman of the Yuma County Board of Supervisors, hereby proclaim the month of October 2020 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. In witness thereof, I have hereunto set my hand and affixed the official seal of the Board of Supervisors, done at Yuma, the county seat, this 19th day of October 2020.
Thank you, Supervisor Pancrase, and I do want to emphasize, normally I am a little bit more glib about, proclamations. They're normally to recognize some sort of a movement that it's sort of relevant. And in this particular time, I think the pandemic has made the situation even more dire. As people have to stay more at home, as people have to deal with the fact that they can't, just go out and mingle and, relax, the situation, I think, has become even more critical. Because everybody's wearing a mask, so I don't know who. Is Saida Alvarez here? Yeah, there she is. She's from the South Yuma County Domestic Violence Task Force. Ama Rivera, there you are, from the Somerton Domestic Task Force. Would you please come up and accept the proclamation from Supervisor Pancrase? And thank you very much for all the work you guys do. Okay, we were all trying to avoid this. So could you come over here and look that way so you can get a picture? I'm talking about the ladies. What? She wants a purse? Oh, makeup.
No, nothing's gonna fix this face.
Well, I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about them.
Oh, they wanted pictures.
They wanted pictures.
Okay, yes, for sure.
We want evidence.
Right. I should have worked. Okay, no, you put it.
Yeah, Martin, hide, Martin, hide. You don't want to be the face of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I get it.
No.
Okay.
If I'd have known picture was going to be taken, I would have stepped down.
Well, see, you could have stood up.
Thank you very much. Well,
could have
yeah,
stood up
I
and
could have
photobombed
stood
it.
up, yeah. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Lynn. Okay, leave it up to you to organize a photo session right away, right?
What can I say?
All right, we're now moving on to the next item in the agenda. And, hey, Kevin, if there's someone outside that needs to come in, you know, there's seats available. All right, the next item is the consent calendar, and the following items listed under the consent agenda will be considered as a group and acted upon by one motion with no separate discussion unless a board member so requests. In that event, the item will be removed from the consent calendar for separate discussion and action. We have items 1 through 9. Does anyone in the board have an item they'd like to pull and discuss? If you don't, then I'll entertain a motion. Go ahead.
Question, do we have to pull it? Ask a question?
Yeah, to ask a question, you have to pull the item out, even if it's just for a quick one.
Okay, let's pull number 5.
Number 5. Okay, so we're pulling out number 5. If you're asking a question from the treasurer, okay, all right, maybe somebody will be able to answer that. We'll figure it out. All right, so is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve 1 through 4 and 6 through 9 on the
1
consent.
through 9 with the exception of 5.
I'll second it.
All right, there's then a motion to approve 1 through 9 with the exception of item number 5. All those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Supervisor McLeod, would you like to ask the question? Maybe the answer is simple. Who knows?
Probably is.
So ask the question and we'll
I'll
see.
ask probably Susan if she knows.
She is already calling help. Help.
Well, we just did this 1 or 2 meetings ago, and I see this specifically references manufactured homes. And so I wonder, is it 2 different things, or is this ratifying the action we took previously? You know?
That was quick. Come in,
Across the street.
step in front of the microphone. Yes, it's for you.
This is
You
why the
saved her.
offices should be close to each other.
Yeah, we'll take it with us, wherever we go.
Hi.
Hello, please answer my question.
Yes.
No, I'm kidding, I already asked it.
Oh, okay.
So-
I missed that part.
Yeah, I know.
And I ran.
So, thank you for that.
No problem.
So we just did this 1 or 2 meetings ago. We eliminated or forgave some taxes.
Correct.
Is this ratifying that, or is this an additional, 'cause I
Action.
see it references manufactured homes.
So, our certificate of clearances I've actually presented quite a few to the board this year. And that is because we finally have a system in place where the ARS refers personal property delinquencies to the Sheriff's Department. And the Sheriff's Department, I'm going to give a shout out to Claudia Garnisa, and she has been awesome in helping us research every single one of these items that has been going on. So it is an ongoing, delinquency that we work on all the time. And so we're now finally getting to the point where the assessor's office and the sheriff's office have both deemed this personal property to be uncollectible with affidavits, and many years old. Some of them we go back to 2010. So we've been working on them. We constantly send out letters 2 times a year. We've also been working on certified mailings that are more recent that we think we can catch them. But so the sheriff's really has stepped up and helped with confirming, literally physically going out to the property. The assessors has confirmed, checking Arizona Department of Revenue's documents. All those things play into these certificates where they have been deemed uncollectible, and this allows them to be taken off the tax roll so they don't sit there assuming we're going to collect them in the future. So this will be an ongoing item that as the sheriff's working on them and confirms them, then I'll be bringing them to you.
Okay, so whenever they come forward, it's just something
That's
new.
right.
I was curious because this one referenced specifically manufactured homes.
They are all personal property, so they would be, most of them would be mobiles, and then some would be P accounts, which is personal property, business, equipment at offices that perhaps have been closed, things like that.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, thank you. And I will commend you on the advancements you've made in your office during your time in office.
And your speed and efficiency in getting here that quick. I think Susan hadn't hung up the phone yet when you were already coming through the door. So.
I know, yeah, I learned last time. Sorry
ESPN.
about that. Thank you.
Were you watching the
I
proceedings?
was, yes, uh-huh.
See, that
That
was pretty
smart.
good. That was smart. Thank you.
Thinking about being across the street.
Thank you guys.
Right.
Bye.
I have another question. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Just trying to stop you.
Wait till she gets back to the office.
Yeah. All right, so do I hear a motion to approve the item as presented?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
I'm afraid to ask. Oh, okay, good. I mean, with everybody wearing a mask, it's tough to know.
Arizona at work.
All right. So the next item in the agenda, it's
Oh, you didn't get a second.
oh,
You get a
that's
second.
all right.
I'll second it. Go
All
ahead.
right, so who made the motion?
I did.
Okay, and there was motion and second to approve item 5 as presented. Any discussion on the item? No discussion on the item. All those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? You know, we have to follow this procedure. We have an attorney in the house. 2 of them, actually. This is Bill. Oh, wow. I mean, this is overwhelming already. All right.
Well, the way you acted last meeting, they
Yeah, well,
Oh,
you all here because you know I'm gonna take him down today, right? Right. Okay, all right. So the next item in the agenda is discussion and action items. The board will open each of the following items separately for discussion and action as appropriate. Recorder and elections is the first item, and we'll hear a presentation and an update regarding the 2020 election cycle and provide feedback and direction if appropriate. Oh, that was quick.
Good morning, Chairman Reyes, members of the board. Robin Stallworth-Poquette, County Recorder. We're 15 days from the election. Can't come quick enough.
How exciting.
So excited. We are up and running next, adjoined to our building, the legacy facility that's next to my office is up and running. We don't have any wait times there for early voting. We do offer early voting through October 30th, so we are getting a great response from voters appearing to vote there. At times that it's been a little bit busier. I don't think we've had any longer than a 3 to 5 minute wait there to vote, so it is proven to be a really great facility to accommodate our needs. We have up to 24 spaces for voters to come in and cast a ballot in consideration of the CDC guidelines, including social distancing. The current returns are pretty large. I have not seen an election where we've had this many ballots in the office received so quickly. We are currently at right under 20,000 ballots that have been received in the office.
Wow.
And 11,352 of those ballots have been received in our drop boxes. Wow. So that's phenomenal for us. We've not had that experience before. The larger number of Dropbox receipts have come from outside here at 197 Main Street in our Dropbox, as well as the Foothills Library. Those are the 2 larger ones right now. We are asking voters to be patient as they look on the website to determine whether or not we've received their ballot. Lots of voters are looking at the website and the Arizona.vote website to see if we have accepted their ballot, but they are doing so within just a day or 2 of mailing them back or dropping them in a drop box. Because of the volume we have received, we're now asking voters to wait 5 to 7 days before they check back, because we have only processed 7,000 of the 20,000 ballots in the last 5 days. So it has gone pretty slow. Those employees and staff members and temp staff are processing ballots one at a time while the phones are ringing and while we're voting people. So that has been somewhat delayed. We're working through that challenge and trying to accommodate everybody that calls, but it has been interesting how many voters are looking to make make sure that our ballot, the ballot has been received in the office.
Question before you move on, because I know you're going to touch on a lot of subjects, but on this one specifically, what is the process where you acknowledge receipt? Is it just acknowledging receipt, or that they have to make sure that everything is okay on the ballot before it's accepted?
So there were two options. There was an option to scan them in one at a time into each record as received, and then come back and then scan them in as accepted once the signature and ballot style was accepted by the staff. We have decided to only touch that ballot once. Instead of having it say received and accepted, we're only going to be showing a response of accepted. Unless there's a problem with the ballot, it will just show received.
No.
That's because once the ballots are processed by the staff member in the voter registration office, they are reviewed one at a time, and then they're collected in batches, and those batches move on to the early board. But because they're processed one at a time, we're trying to, based on the volume, only touch them once in the office to get through as many as we can.
So you're basically actually certifying that the ballot is right and that it can be counted. What happens to the ones that can't be?
The ballots that are not accepted for processing are going to show in the system as received, and then a letter is mailed to the voter and a phone call is made to the voter to try to resolve whatever the issue is. The several that we've had, I think we've had under 40 or 50 ballots that have been, there's been an issue, either it's not signed or the signature doesn't match the voter's record. Those ballots, we actually mailed them a new package last week for those voters that we've already determined could not move on to the accepted stage. So that's simply to try to expedite their response to the issue.
That's great news. And it also is going to emphasize just how much of an effort you're all putting into making sure that every voter has a chance to vote, actually. So that's very good news to me anyway. I don't know if it's good news to everyone, but the fact that people will be able to actually fix a problem who may be inadvertent. I mean, some people just change their signature over time. They don't realize that. It's really good and really nice to find out you guys are going through that extra step to make sure that everybody's vote gets counted.
Correct. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Robin, for the public, would you describe how they go online and check? They go to the Yuma County website. I assume they go to the recorder.
Chairman Reyes, Supervisor McLeod, the easiest way right now is to go to the Arizona.vote website, which is the statewide database. It's connected to the database that is logging in the ballots for each county. So once they go, they'll have options there, whether they need to check the status of their ballot, check on their county's information for vote centers, or if they're just looking for the Yuma County information that is related to vote centers and how to contact our office, we're asking them to visit yumacountyvotes.com. But the ballot status is Arizona.vote.
Arizona.vote, no .gov, just .vote.
Arizona.vote.
Thank you.
Right.
Based on the returns thus far, we have transferred, I believe, 7,000 or under 7,000 over to the elections office. The early board is coming in tomorrow at 9 a.m. That board is going to start opening and processing the early ballots. They can usually get through about 4,000 to 5,000 a day. So that process will begin tomorrow at 9 a.m. They were expected to come start this process later in the week, but we are having them start tomorrow based on the volume we've received thus far. So after that begins, we then have the tabulation board starting to tabulate ballots on Wednesday, October 21st. That's important because the early board is not tabulating. They're simply opening and separating ballots, making sure that it's only one ballot being counted out of the package, and making sure that the ballot style the person voted is applicable to the district that they currently live in. It's a very fast process, but it also makes sure that your vote remains confidential. The tabulation beginning on Wednesday will call for our ballot cam to be active. So the ballot cam is the live feed of the tabulation process. It will be online Wednesday morning, the 21st, as tabulation starts here at 197 Main Street. Again, those results won't be released out of the election management system until 8 p.m. election night, but we really need to get a head start on tabulation because it's slow. It's with the volume, we're going to be tabulating several days between now and Election Day.
Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Robin, do they work on the weekends?
Chairman Ray, Supervisor Pancrazy, yes, correct. We will start working this weekend. I believe Elections Department will be tabulating to keep up with the early boards processes that will start tomorrow. So that's probably the larger part that'll get accomplished on the weekends. Okay. Similarly, our voter services staff will be working on the weekends as they have been to process the signatures, process the ballots coming in before it continues to those 2 steps. I don't think voters are aware that it goes through that many steps, but that's simply to maintain one vote, one voter, and the security of each and every ballot. So tabulation, we have gotten the question if the results will be coming out periodically, and I mentioned that simply because no one sees the results, staff doesn't see the results or the tabulation progress. It's simply held in the system in a server until it's released at 8 p.m. election night.
Robin, would you tell the public how they would go to that webcam?
Yes, so Chairman Ray, Supervisor McLeod, the webcam will be live at the Yuma County website. So you can go to yumacountyvotes.com and there will be a box there that you can click on to watch the live ballot cam. We have advised the political parties of the ballot cam activation to let them know, as we do expect we will have some observers to these processes for both of the political parties. That's all I have. I did want to note that early voting in person is at the facility adjoining our building has been quite active. We have voted over 1,600 voters as of early this morning, just coming in person.
How does that compare to anything in the past? Because obviously you said this is a little more, well, a lot more than you used to. So 20,000 ballots received back. That's about, I don't know, maybe 30%, maybe a little less than 30% of the actual ballots you sent out, which was 70 something, a little less than 80, from what I've known. So how does that compare to the past? Is that like double the past, triple the past?
Chairman Reyes, members of the board, from what I recall from the last 2 federal cycles, I haven't looked at the statistic from 16 and 18 at this particular point with 15 days remaining, but has been my experience that we will generally have about half of that received in the office thus far. And in addition, in voting in person in the office, I would say would probably be about 25% of what we've seen so far. Wow. But we expected it to get busier this week and next week. We had not expected that volume to already have started this last week after early voting started. So the week and a half that we've had to vote in person and by early ballot is just, I would say it's been more than a 50% increase across the board because of the visitors.
Supervisor Bancroft?
Mr. Chair, Robin, do you think it's because of the advertising that we did? The billboards and the whatnot?
Chairman Reyes, Supervisor Pancrazy, I would hope so. I do think that advertising helps people understand that they could vote in person. We have received lots of calls of voters not knowing that they could walk in and vote in person. Although we've done that for years, I don't think it was as widely known. The last week of early voting in 2016, we had an average of 900 voters a day. And that was the largest volume over the last 8 years that we've experienced in the office. But we expected that the last week through October 30th. It's the average right now at about 200 people a day is a lot for us. But we're very excited that we have the space and it's set up in a really functional way so that people are in and out and not having to linger or stay in line. So it's been nice. I hope that the advertising has helped people understand what their options are, as that's remained a concern for voters, whether they're early voters or not.
So to emphasize the process, you can request an early ballot up until when?
You can request an early ballot be mailed to you through October 23rd. So this Friday will be the last day that voters can request the mailing of the ballot, and then in person through next Friday the 30th.
Okay, those are important. How are you dealing with the continually changing deadline for registration?
Chairman Reyes, members of the board, it remains difficult for us to work through the deadline registration extension. However, I think we came up with a process that we handled it. The deadline extension significantly impacted the processing immediately. So with the volume coming in and the processing of the forms and the online submissions, that's initially what kind of got us off to a rough start in processing ballots. Once you have registrations coming in that need to be processed and linked to an individual, then you have the early ballots coming in at the same time. There's a lot of cross data comparison, making sure that the voter hasn't registered in another county, making sure the voter had not submitted a ballot in another county because early voting already started. And we often have that issue with Maricopa and Pima County. You'll see voters move back and forth from those two counties predominantly because of perhaps schooling or the universities. So those two actions happening at the same time did cause us some challenges. We worked through it similar to what you would do with a provisional ballot process, and we're finishing up those registrations right now. We still have, I think, several hundred registrations to work through this next couple of days, when I would have hoped we would have just been working on the ballots coming in.
Right, so are these people going to have, I got you, Supervisor Becker. Just let me finish with this line of questions.
No kidding, no problem.
So if a person registers, say, the 6th or the 7th of October, their registration is going to be valid.
Absolutely.
All right, so you're going to, the last one that I heard was the 15th of October. Is that still a deadline?
Chairman Rice, that's correct. October 15th at midnight.
So October 15th, which is passed, basically, right?
Correct.
So nobody should expect to register this week and get a ballot. I mean, that's not going to happen unless it changed again, but let's just not go there. So right now, a person that registered before 15th or by the 15th, it's basically kind of almost assured that they'll have an opportunity to vote either absentee or in person, right? If you have this week to ask for a ballot, basically. And if you don't, then you have the ability to either vote the day of the election or vote in person in a site that is, in the site that you guys have set up or the election department has set up. Those are the options, right?
Correct. And Chairman Reyes, if anybody registered up through October 15th, they are can be completely assured that they can vote in this election by one of those
methods. All right, Supervisor Pankersi.
Do you need more people?
Oh.
Chairman Reyes, Supervisor Pancrezi, I believe we are completely staffed with the exception of, I believe, 4 or 5 positions that withdrew last week. I think we had a few poll workers call and cancel last week, and I will get with the elections director to find out what the status of that is. Again, our challenge there is balancing the board so you have an equal number of Republicans and equal number of Democrats. We did have an ample number of applications to look through to fill those spots, so I think we will be fine. Adding the Readiness Center at 24th Street in Arabi needed to be fully staffed, so that was accomplished. However, with those people dropping out, we have the applications to look through and find someone to take their place.
Mr. Chair and Robin, I meant to do the processing. Do you have enough people?
Chairman, Supervisor Pancrezi, I believe we're okay. The difficult thing with that is the signature verification and the processing of the ballots. We're only allowing certified staff to process them, and we did send a number of temporary staff through that training. The expert that trained those staff members came down to Yuma from Phoenix to train over the course of 2 days that she was here, and so those trained temp workers are helping us with that. And this is their first year, so if they come back for future elections, they'll be a little quicker, and the process will be a little quicker. But again, I don't believe it's the process. I think it's the volume and handling the registrations that we've gotten for the extension. In regard to the registrations, it's not just a paper form. Those people, all the prospective voters that are filling out the registration online, those are all reviewed one at a time as well, and then that's where we start making cross checks to other counties and making sure that we don't already have a record for those individuals. Many individuals were putting their information online to register or update their registration, and when they didn't see it processed immediately, they were resubmitting them several times. So that, again, kind of bogged us down a little bit. We had several people that registered online over the course of a couple days 4 or 5 times. It wasn't an instant process, and I think voters were confused by that.
I know that this may not be a question that it's better addressed to you than to the legislature, for example, but it is my understanding that the state of Arizona now has about a third, a little over a third of registered voters as Republicans, a little more than maybe a third as Democrats, but the other section of it, the big section of it, is independents. How are they represented in this process where we always say representatives of the Republican and Democratic Party are basically given the opportunity to see this, but is there anything that addresses the issue that a third of these voters are independents?
Chairman Reyes, members of the board, there is not a statutory provision for the observation of any non-affiliated voters. So Libertarian Party is also recognized on a state level, so we have the opportunity for observers and hand count participation from the Republican Party, the Democrat Party, and the Libertarian Party. However, there is not a provision for the unaffiliated voters. And the unaffiliated voters in Yuma County exceeds the number of Republicans or Democrats here in Yuma.
All right, so that should be something.
I have one more question.
Yeah, hold on.
Okay.
Okay, Supervisor Pancrasi and then Supervisor McLeod.
Okay. Mr. Chair and Robin, the libraries, having them as extra drop facilities, has that helped? Do you think that has helped, or?
Chairman Reyes, Supervisor Pancrasi, I expected our drop boxes would be taken very well, or received very well from the voters. I was not expecting the numbers that we've gotten there so far. At the Foothills Library, we've received over 2,700 ballots in that drop box since last week. And again, ballots weren't mailed out until the 7th, 8th, and 9th. So that's really only over a 5-day period. Outside of our office, of course, was almost 5,500.
What about Maine?
And the main library is 1,050.
Okay.
So the Foothills Library has been much bigger, perhaps because of distance. South County, the drop boxes there are right under 500 for all of them. Mm-hmm. And the Welton Library is just under 200. So all of them have been very well received. I have to say, all of the drop boxes, with the exception of our drop box in front of our office for the 2018 election, had under, it was far under 1,000 ballots total for the entire election. Wow. So for us to have over 11,000 ballots received in these boxes is pretty phenomenal.
Oh, I can't help but compliment you again on the fact that no matter what, and no matter all the noise and the distractions and everything else, you seem to be running a very well-oiled machinery that deals with these issues pretty much ahead of time. So, and I'm really pleased to have you come over and give us this report, because it allows everybody that wants to know just what's going on. And to, I think in some ways we just tend to ask you the questions that I'm sure in some voters' minds that, once you give an answer, at least there's an answer out there, and there's no, we're telling them, look, you can check on your box, you can check the count to see the count, you can, you can do deposit at these locations. I mean, all this stuff that is being done right now, I wish it was being done nationally, because of all the controversies surrounding voting, absentee voting, that it really is a distraction, and this is a very tough election. So the least distractions we have in terms of the process, the better off I think we'll end up at the end. We talk about transparency. I think that every effort is being made to make this process transparent to everybody that wants to actually look at it objectively. Thank you. Supervisor McLeod?
Thank you very much, Chairman Rice. And thank you for the opportunity for having us give these updates. I appreciate that. We will be back on the 2nd. If probably look pretty tired, but we'll be on.
Supervisor McLeod?
Mr. Fahili, can I ask a question that is completely non-voting related?
No. I would say no.
Not on this item, you wouldn't be able to.
That's weird that you would be at. I think you should have asked the question and then dealt with the consequences.
I don't have a question. I just want to say keep up the good work, Robin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Yes.
I can ask the question for you.
Call me after you have a question or have any concerns. When you leave today, please let us know if you would like to visit, just to see kind of how we're set up. Please do that. I think we're very excited about the way it's working out. The volume has taken us for taken us for a ride, but I do think we'll be able to work through it and troubleshoot the challenges as far as processing. But again, the early voting process, as you mentioned, Chairman Reyes, is quite secure. There are many different steps. So given the rhetoric, I appreciate you noting how safe it is to vote early.
I'll have a complaint by the second.
I appreciate
All right,
that. Thank you. Okay.
How many temps did you hire?
We currently have 16.
Wow.
And in 2018, we had 2.
What about 16 was where you had the long lines over at the other office, right?
Yes, 16 is where we have the long lines.
Yeah.
And actually, even Mr. Kirkus and our county attorney, Mr. Smith, even helped us set up one day because the lines were getting so long. And we expected that, but just not this early. We are excited that there's no wait time across the street right now. We are prepared, as you heard at the county line, we're prepared to distribute a wait time. If there appears to be a wait time over 10-15 minutes, then we will start logging it to make sure voters can check that on our social media account.
Okay, I think we have the attorney Bill Kirk out there in the back. He'll guard you all the way to the recorder's office.
He's still answering our phone calls. We're really surprised, and we really appreciate everybody's help. So thank you.
All right.
Have a
Well,
great
we
day.
can't tell whether he's happy or not because he's got a mask on, but thank you.
Thank you.
for
Have
the
a great
report.
day.
Thanks. Okay.
Thank you.
It's nice not to have her ask for anything. So we'll move on next to the next item in the agenda, which is Health Services District Emergency Management Discussion and Possible Action regarding COVID-19 updates and activities. Before you begin, I want to tell you how pleased I am that both the Election Department and the Health Department are doing such a great job that they're being seen by people outside as a pilot, as a method to follow. That is, to me, just in case, because sometimes, age, you forget to say something. I wanted to say that now. And I know that you're not going to tell us anything that's going to dispel that
Thank you.
perception. Thank you. Where's your counterpart?
Oh, there wasn't any seating here. So
Where's Maria at?
she's watching it next door.
Bring her in. Well, she can hear that, so,
Yes.
right.
Okay, good morning, Chairman Reyes,
Morning.
members of the board. First of all, I'd like to start off by giving you an update on this weekend's. Oh, Diana Gomez, Director of Public Health. I'm so sorry. I'd like to start off by highlighting how well this weekend's event went. As you know, we partnered with Arizona State University as well as Arizona Western College to sponsor the first saliva testing event here in Yuma County. Initially, we had planned for about 300, 400 tests to occur, and the response from the Yuma County community was so great that we in essence doubled that. And so kudos and a huge thank you to Dr. Kerr and the staff at Arizona Western College who did an amazing job. Everybody regrouped to make that happen. So at the end of the day, in that time span, what we did was just expand capacity to make sure that we stuck to that time frame, and we processed everybody that was there. We ended up having 671 saliva tests. As a backup, we had some rapid testing options available, so we went ahead and did about 40 of those. So we did over 700 tests, which was great. And so staff really rallied. You see me stand before you most of the weekends or most of the Mondays giving the update, but there's a whole team that makes this happen. And kudos to Lynn Harlow-Smith and the Public Health Emergency Preparedness Program, because they did an amazing job putting this together. And they've been working behind the scenes. You don't see them because I come to the update, but they're the ones that have been doing the PPE distribution along with our nursing staff who's been testing. And so just want to give them a huge thank you. We're looking to repeat this again next Saturday in Welton. It's going to be held at the Welton Library from 8 to 12. Again, we want to encourage people to please pre-register. It makes the process go by so much faster. We processed everybody on Saturday, and results, people are already getting results. So people were getting their results last night, yesterday afternoon. So that's a very quick turnaround within the 24 hours. And then there's still some results that are due to come in. So we're sticking with that 24 to 48 hours. Again, it's important, if you didn't get a chance to participate, please drive out to Welton.
we're very excited to provide that opportunity out down East County, and so we're hoping that people that are still interested in participating register and sign up so that we can have a good turnout.
Diana,
Yes, sir.
how do they register?
So you can go on our Facebook page. You can go on the ASU page. There's on the county website as well. There's a QR code or there's a link that you can use. It's very easy. It just expedites the process when you're there. So it creates an account for you. That way you're notified quickly. And so we were really pleased to be able to see the results. And again, our communications director, Kevin Tennell, is going to push out more information, but it's on our county website and as well as the Facebook page. And you'll be seeing that information again because we do want that turnout. Our positivity rates, along with the rest of the state, have been increasing. And that was to be expected again as we're resuming a lot of activities throughout the county, throughout the state. You saw schools reopen, you saw business increase capacity, you saw the permitting of some events. And so it's an important time to remind people that those mitigation strategies that allowed us to move from the substantial, at least in our community, to moderate are still in effect. And they're important in order for us to continue to move forward. I wanted to give you some perspective. On September 6th, at the end of that week reporting, we had a 5% positivity rate. The following week, it inched a little bit up to 6%. September 20th, we were at 6%. And then the week ending September 27th, we were up to 9%. October 4th, we went up to 10, and the week ending October 11th, 13%. So what we're seeing now is we're seeing some of these, during the contact tracing, come back to these cluster events where, obviously there's COVID fatigue, people are getting together, relaxing those guidelines. And so it's important to remember that those are still in place. We want to keep moving forward. We're very supportive of having a measured, cautious, but safe approach. It's important to continue to support our businesses and schools. Schools are back in session. You saw businesses fill out attestations where they outlined their safety plans. Venues did the same thing. Our schools implemented mitigation plans, and they're following it. So as it's important for us as patrons, as people that attend these events, as people in the community that support these events, that we support them. And the way we do that is by adhering to those guidelines. The business owner, the venue, the person that owns the venue, and the event organizer are responsible for setting out these guidelines and for enforcing them and addressing them. And so as patrons, I just want to urge our community to please continue to abide by those. That is the way we support our businesses in continuing to open and continuing to expand capacity. It's the way we continue to support our schools. Schools play such an important role in the development of children and supporting, just the overall well-being of children. And so a safe school is dependent on, low community spread in general. So again, just a reminder for people to please, be patient, bear with us as we continue to move forward. And again, continuing these safety protocols so that we continue to, expand, business capacity and continue to operate our schools safely.
Let me ask a question about testing, because it's always sort of bothered me to think about it in terms of an indicator of a positivity rate in the community. As I witness, for example, the Mexican, the other side doing testing, their testing is basically with people who have it or seem to have symptoms, which is a pretty good way of, getting a very high positivity rate. But in the case of, for example, Yuma County or the state of Arizona, where testing is voluntary, where people might have just at some particular point in time just gotten tired of getting tested and finding out they're negative. How do you, well, I wouldn't use the word justify, but how do you get to a point that you really have a true snapshot of what the virus is in the community or what level it is in the community when you have people not getting tested unless they feel they have something, some sort of symptoms? And that's really difficult for me to sort of justify. I mean, the positivity rate is based on people who want to get tested. People who want to get tested is not necessarily just everyone out in the streets. So how does that work for you all?
Chairman Reyes, members of the board, so that is a challenge. Again, positivity rate is a reflection of the total number of tests that come back positive over the overall number of tests administered. And so if you do just have people that were symptomatic come out, then you're more likely to get, that positive and positivity rates. However, in order to capture a true snapshot, it's important for people to come out and get tested. We know that you can be asymptomatic and continue to spread the virus, which is the case when we have these big events. That's what we captured. That's why hosting this particular event this weekend was important, because you're seeing the results within 24, 48 hours, which is ample time for people to make decisions if your results come back positive, to self-isolate or to quarantine and follow the protocol. When people come to these events, they're giving guidance at the event. Should your test come back positive, this is what you do if you're experiencing symptoms. So they have that information. That information is followed up and reinforced should the test come back positive with additional guidance. But to answer your question, it's difficult. There's definitely COVID fatigue. It's the same thing with the relaxing of, people are tired of being tested over the mask, but it's an important metric. We take that into consideration along with things like hospitalization rates and the overall reporting of infections. So it's a combination, but in order to have, the businesses and the schools, the metrics that are set forth are based on positivity being one of the metrics. So it's important that we routinely provide these testing opportunities so that people continue to access them. And then as long as we're getting results within 24 to 48 hours, it gives us ample time to respond appropriately. And the end goal is really to mitigate the transmission of the disease, to lower those numbers, and to continue to operate, again, safely.
The reason I bring that up is because I think that we need to sort of refocus the purpose of testing. I think in the past, the purpose of testing was to find out who had it. And now the purpose of the testing should be to give us a picture of who doesn't have it. In other words, we need the community to understand that testing is sort of like a civic duty at this particular time. It's something that you need to do educational-wise so that you get the information. But it's also something that helps the businesses stay open, something that helps, the process of normalization. At some way, you advance the process. I don't think that that's necessarily how I hear people thinking about testing. I hear people thinking about testing as a chore. I don't really want to get tested, especially if they're going to stick something up my nose or, up and down my throat or something. I know the saliva testing, it might have been, it's part of that psychology that tells you, okay, well, why do I want to get tested if I'm not sick, if I'm not feeling anything? And we need to have people realize that testing is a way to get a snapshot of the community's health, not just their particular health, but the community's health. And if people continue to come to be tested only when they feel sick, we're going to have high positivity rates because of obvious reasons. So we need the community to understand that testing is going to be a part of the process until we develop a vaccine, until people don't need to be tested. But right now, people need to test. They need to test to make sure they're okay. They need to test to make sure their family's okay. They need to be tested to make sure that businesses can come back, and that we can go back to some sort of a intermingling situation that isn't, just driven by fear. And I don't know if that's what we need to, we need to reassess what we're asking people to test for. You're asking people to test not to see if you're positive. You're actually asking people now to test to see if you're not positive.
Right. To measure community spread, to your point. And it's true. And these events and the guidance that is provided, and I think you raised a really good point, is meant to raise awareness and help business owners and help schools and help the rest of us make those decisions that we need to make. It's not meant to raise fears or cause concern or alarm. It really is to provide an accurate, real-time picture of where we are as in a community. So as we're planning additional events, as we're, again, opening up, as we're moving forward, people made sacrifices. There was events that were canceled, businesses that remained closed for a substantial amount of time. It's to give them that ability to confidently move forward and expand capacity, meeting those guidelines that were either set through executive order at the state level and meet the CDC and state recommendations, which of course we support. But to your point, yes, it is now to be able to make those decisions and recommendations and allow those businesses and schools and the resumption of some of those, events, community events that in many instances, community events, for example, for nonprofits or many of our other local businesses are important. And so we want to support those, and this is a way to do that.
Supervisor McLeod, I know you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question. Diana, did anyone do the math from the this past weekend, and what was the positivity rate at the 700?
Too early.
So those reports have not been reported back to us yet. The individuals have been contacted, but overall tallied, we don't have those reports as today. We're expecting them later this afternoon. We did have there was a reporting wise. I could tell you that reports from like Friday, the ones that came in Friday night prior to this testing, and these are not affiliated with the testing event. On Saturday, the trending positivity rate for our county was 27%. Then it went down to 13, then it went up to 15. And again, that does not include any of the tests from Saturday's event. Even though people are starting to receive those results and they've gotten the guidance, overall, we haven't gotten the total number yet.
Okay, would you just send that to Susan?
Yes, and we expect to have those hopefully all turned in by Wednesday.
With the possible advent of in-house testing, meaning people can test themselves, how is that going to work out in the positive testing if you don't know what people are testing at home?
So right now, in addition to the stand-up testing, so if you drive, on the way here, I saw Sunset's Community or Sunset Health has their ongoing testing. Regional Center has that. You have your private providers that are testing. Those are required to be reported at the state level. All labs report that data. Then we're moving towards antigen testing, which is another form of rapid response testing. They're very thin. They're about half the size of like the size of a credit card, actually. And you're required to report those numbers now as well, antigen testing. I don't know that those tests are, yeah, it's a swab. It's a small swab. It's fairly comfortable. And again, you get the results within 15 minutes. It's something that we're working to make sure is available. The state received an allocation, is going to receive an allocation by the end of the year, about over 2 million, and those are distributed to counties, and we're going to make sure that they go out to some of these testing facilities as well as congregate settings like our nursing homes that are already using them quite successfully. And again, those reports are being reported to the state. I'm not sure about the advent of at-home testing and how that goes, but since it's processed through the lab, at least the regular test kits that were available at home testing, then the lab would report them.
All right. You said you did about 40 rapid response tests. Do you have sort of like a snapshot of that?
So we actually did 31 rapid tests, and we had 2 positives, and they were right within the first. Yeah. So
that gives you an idea of what basically happens when a lot of community members just come out to get tested.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to find 2 in 30 or whatever, but you're not. The positivity rate is not going to be as high as when you actually ask people to come and get tested when they're sick, or when they're feeling something, or when they have a fear of something, when they've been in touch with someone. That's a little bit disconcerting to me. How do we expect the positivity rate to go down when we're asking people to test only when they have some fear that they may have it? Really, it's really difficult to see. Supervisor Porches?
I think a lot of the fear that people don't want to test is because they're not going to be able to work, so they won't get paid.
Yeah.
So,
in other words, there's a stigma to get tested.
Well, but I mean, and I don't blame them. I mean,
right.
they gotta support, their householding, so it's just not,
It's not without consequences, I guess, is what we.
Yeah,
and you're right.
It's just not, people won't get tested, and if we go to that fast test at the house, if I got tested and I know I'm positive, and I'm gonna say, well, hey, I'm not gonna get paid for the next 10 days, I won't say anything. I mean, and that's
no, you won't kiss your neighbor. Well, you kiss your neighbor if you don't like him,
but as long as they don't have any symptoms, they're not gonna say anything.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult. We gotta get past the stigma of the test. I mean, people who get tested, shouldn't be punished for doing so, and that's what eventually happens. You get a sort of a stigma that comes with it. If you say you got tested, people think, well, why did you get tested? Do you have some, and that we gotta get past. If we want to beat the positivity percentage and stay below a certain percentage, we need widespread testing. We need testing that isn't just done to find out if you're sick, but to find out if you're not. And we got to get that message out somehow.
And Chairman Reyes, members of the board, to that point, that's why it's important that you have these minimally invasive, easy to follow, precautionary, mitigation strategies like wearing a mask and hand washing, and as an added layer of a layered approach towards combating the spread of this disease. Because if you're wearing a mask and I'm wearing a mask, it reduces the risk of transmission. So yes, it'd be great if people, the accessible testing is readily accessible. It's available. That was one of the early challenges that we faced with the procurement of PPE, so that we can distribute it through our community, particularly to our first responders and law enforcement officers. The procurement of testing supplies, so that testing was generally and readily available at all parts of the county. And those challenges have been met, and they've been sustainable, and they're available. And so as we move forward, again, having that continued testing, making sure that those testing opportunities are available throughout the county, which again is why we're doing something in Welton, because there's issues like transportation in addition to all these things that inhibit participation sometime, and continuing to refine those processes are all critical to reducing
Or start
positivity.
to recruit high volume type situations. This morning I went to my office earlier, the other office earlier. There was a long line of cars, like a half a mile long, and I figured there must be some free testing going on. It wasn't. It was a food bank distribution. And that's if we were to coordinate some of that situation where you have a crowd coming in for some other reason, that you could actually tell them, would you test? It may help, or it may help, like, when people are crossing the border, if we offer them free testing, that they'll get a result if they have an email, you can get tested for free. Those type of things may be something that we need to start looking at right now, that the numbers are going up, and the numbers are going to go up in a way that is not going to help us. If this continues, if you have 25 or 20% positive, rate, positivity rate, it's not going to take long before somebody figures that out and says, hey, we're going to have this uphill curve, ascent to a point where, half of the tests are going to come back positive, and you're not going to have any reason or you're going to have too many reasons to start again to clamp down on some of the activities. And that's we've got to work our way into a situation where we actually get a true sense of what's out in the community, and not necessarily a positivity test or positivity rate is not the way. If we don't make the test available to everybody, it's not the way I like to see us going. Supervisor Clark.
Thank you. Diana, what prevents us from, we've got 1,500 county employees roughly, to going to all the county offices and asking them to participate. And then, even better than that, a high traffic area, a grocery store, a Walmart, Sam's Club, that kind of a thing, setting up there and asking people or just casually going by, hey, we've got this saliva test, all you do is spit in this tube, and you'll get your results.
Give us 15
have we
minutes.
Considered setting up something like that to get a high number of tests?
So we've actually done, we started doing workforce testing. So we did at county employees this past Thursday. I believe we started with one department. We have to rotate to the different departments, but we started with one. And then work site testing has been readily available with our community partners as well. So places like Regional Center for Border Health have gone to different work sites. We can certainly think of a similar strategy as well. Again, but the saliva test is in coordination with ASU. And so ASU, we don't get those. We don't have a supply readily available. They're coordinated in conjunction with these particular events. So we have to predetermine these events and get the logistical support, again, from traffic control, and ASU comes down and brings us, but we don't have a ready allocation of saliva tests. We do have the PCR, the standard swab testing available, but coordinating something of that size, that's why we're hoping to have them down on a regular basis so that we can make those available.
Well, I think it works better if you enlist like the cities and the towns and, and the community. If you enlist them in a situation where you have this testing that is not mandatory per se, but at least it's easy to get done, and the employers, allow you to take the time and do it, because again, we're going to get into a situation. Farm workers, their fear, and I go back to what Supervisor Portia said a minute ago. Farm workers are afraid that if they test positive, they're not going to be able to come to work for 14 days, and their fear is probably of that is probably bigger than the fear of having the COVID itself. They may not understand that having COVID and passing it on to their family members, elderly family members, is going to be a health issue that's going to be much more expensive than simply testing positive and having to quarantine for a few days. But anyway, I think that we need to move from the COVID-19 being a health issue that sends people to the hospital to being a health issue that is preventing businesses from coming back up, that is preventing, a return to some sort of normalcy in our society. And we need people to get educated to the fact that testing, it's being done for the purposes of keeping the system operating and not, having it come crashing down when you have this situation where you don't do contact tracing because you don't know, you don't follow up because you don't know, and you have a high positivity rate because the only people that you have tested is people who show some signs or are afraid they've been in contact with somebody that had it. It's just, to me, we need to start looking at testing as a different a method of being able to come back as opposed to a method to keep people out.
Right.
Okay? I know this can take a long time. Any other things?
I just
Because
have a quick
every
question,
time I
Mr.
try
Chairman.
to let you go, I stop with something else.
Just a quick question. You talk about registering online before the event. How much time is it if they don't register online? How much time are you talking when they show up to register?
Oh, okay. So normally the event, the way it was set up, there was no pre-registration. If you didn't register, then the event was only open for those people that registered. The staff wanted to make sure that we afforded that opportunity, so went ahead and set something up. But it required a lot more logistics, and then the people that had pre-registered, it held up that process for people making it more. It took more time to process everybody else that had registered. So for this particular event, we're tracking the numbers and we're seeing the amount of people that show up, working on contingency plan. But it just, we promoted it and told people you'd be able to come in and get out and work through the process very, very seamlessly. And it went seamlessly. It just took longer. And so it's a whole other level of logistics. And generally for those types of events, it's not an option. And we opted to make it an option so that nobody would be turned away. So it takes the filling out the forms and doing all that process is what takes the longest, rather than the actual collecting of the sample. That's fairly quickly.
I would just want to bring it up so people could understand that go online, please. It makes it a lot
yes.
quicker than having to get in line and then wait and fill out the paperwork.
Yeah, it
when you're
impacts
on
everybody
scene.
else. And so if there's difficulty, there was people that reached out and said we're having difficulty for whatever reason. Maybe the QR wasn't working, so they were provided with a link. And so as long as people engage and let us know of those issues, people are willing to work, staff's willing to work with them, make sure that they get registered.
Yeah, but I think I go back. I got you, Supervisor McLeod. But I think the issue of having people register goes back to the fact that that's a choice people make. And most of the time they're making the choice because there's something in there that's driving them. And it isn't the public's benefit or the public health situation. It's their own problems, their own fears, their own idea that they may get it or they may have had it. They might have been in the theater with the other 3 people that were there last night, and and feel like, okay, I was at an enclosed area with other people I don't know. In other words, that just the fact that you want to register for something like this, if it isn't just a simple, walking into Walmart and walking out of Walmart and deciding, okay, well, I'm getting tested, not because I feel like I need to, but because I want to. That to me is a mental transition that we have to make if we're going to have testing work out for us. Supervisor McLeod, last question.
More of a statement. I think you should probably work with Mr. Tennell to make our homepage where to go, because I looked around on the homepage and I looked in the health district. I couldn't find it. I was finally smart enough now to click on the COVID, and it's right there.
So
we should have something on the home and the health district homepage.
An additional
tab that says go here for testing procedure.
There's yes, and we will follow up on that. And there is for everybody else, there is a banner, the COVID banner that you click on. There's daily updates that are produced that will just not only give you our daily count numbers, but information and guidance in a variety of topics. We're testing events, and that's embedded in there as well. But yeah, having it more prominently displayed.
But looking on the county homepage and on the health district page, I didn't see it.
If you're just looking for that tagline, it's going to be difficult. Okay, we will definitely work on that.
Is there a number that someone can call and just to register or?
No, it's either using the link or using the QR code, which takes you directly in there, allows you to input the information, because most people have the phones. It's a rapid way to be able to use that on there.
Probably.
So we're
But if
only,
they have any,
we're only targeting Facebook users or.
no, it's available on our
It's
website.
the
There's
website.
different promotional
Or
events.
computer, the person.
Computer people.
Well, you can access it, well, I guess, you can access it on your smartphone, so you're saying
But
people
you
that
just,
have
it's
difficulty.
tough to read it within the phone, so.
I'm just saying because it's just Facebook or computer, not everybody owns a computer. I mean, you talked about farm workers or people at the grocery store. I mean, it's just hard to reach those people.
Right.
So, I mean, we're just targeting a certain group.
And with
And that happens in every city is probably doing that, the same thing. They only target Facebook users, which, but it's not everybody has Facebook.
Social media.
correct. And to that point, Chairman Reyes, members of the board.
I think cards.
Board
It
member
works pretty well.
Fortes. So it's available on different platforms, the link is, but you're right, heavily advertised on social media. It can be accessed in your smartphone. For events like farm worker events and some of those other things, we've worked with partner agencies like Campesinos Sin Fronteras to promote those events. We've also scheduled individual testing events. But to Supervisor Chairman Reyes's point earlier, it's voluntary. So like with the event we hosted, where we hosted that, it was a particular farm worker contractor that contacted us and said, I want to host this event. And so at that particular event, we distributed PPE, we had testing available and flu shots. So those are more targeted, localized events for that sector of the community. Congregate settings like nursing homes, those are conducting ongoing testing now on a regular basis. So that's a way that they're keeping the mitigation. So for our general community, again, it's working with those partners that work with the specific populations to promote that. And they can call our offices if they have concerns. But again, it's just one of those things where it's diversifying it and working with those community partners who are actually working with those target populations to make sure that they have access to that. But again, work site events are a possibility. And again, individual events for communities and certain sectors, business sectors, including our farm worker community, can be arranged separately.
Right. Okay, I think you've given us a pretty good sense of what's going on over the last couple of weeks. Looking forward to your next one, the second. That's going to be a tough one. Any other questions? No? I keep asking that question when I know that if I keep it open long enough, there will be one. So thank you very much for the presentation and looking forward to your next one. And again, appreciative of all the effort you guys put out to make sure that the community joins with us in this particular difficult time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, the next item I've been receiving complaints lately that I have made these meetings last too long, so I'm gonna move them forward. Discussion.
By who?
By everyone.
Oh, really? Oh.
Discussion, but you, everybody but you. You like to stay here all the way through. So the next item in the agenda is financial services. Discussion and possible action to provide guidance and direction regarding the possibility of issuing pension obligation bonds to fully fund the county's current unfunded liability for its public safety personal retirement system and correction officer retirement pension plans. If the board considers it appropriate to issue bonds, to schedule a public hearing to receive comments and on authorizing the county to secure obligations by November 16 and approve the necessary budget adjustment to complete the transactions. This says that staff will give a power presentation and that Claude Lockhart, the vice president of Stifel, Nicholas and Company, will be present. I suppose that, which one of the unknown individuals here, you or you?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we have the administrator of PSPRS here.
Okay, great.
We're very lucky to have him.
I like his haircut. It resembles mine.
Mike Townsend, Mark Reeder, the managing director with Stifel, our police nation, has stepped out.
And I hope you all receive a warning that, we got to pay attention and stay focused on this.
We also have at the phone two of the members of the Stifel team, Mr. Claude Lockhart. Claude, can you guys hear us?
Claude.
Hi, we can hear you. Good afternoon.
And Omar Dahesti. They also are part of the Stifel team.
All right.
Yuma
Good
County
afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board.
Right.
Yuma County participates in two pension plans with the PSPRS, Public Safety Personnel System. The Public Safety Personnel, which is for our Sheriff's Office, and the Correctional Officers Retirement System, which is for the detention. As of the last actuarial report, dated June 30th, 2019, the total amount combined for the unfunded liability was $29.6 million. Short after the budget adoption, I got approached by two of the board members, Supervisor Pancrasi and Supervisor Simmons. They asked me if there's anything that we can do to address this unfunded liability. So we had invited PSPRS to come and provide the board with a comprehensive summary review about our current position when it comes to our unfunded liability, the programs, the changes that they're making to the programs, and that should give us a better understanding how this debt service came about and what the steps that we're doing for us to address this situation. Like I said, we're very happy to have the PSPRS administrator himself, Michael Townsend, to deliver the presentation.
Hold on a minute. Just stop. Hold on. You have a question?
A statement.
I have a question. Where is the elected officials pension plan on this? Because it includes judges, it includes a lot of people. I mean, where is it? You mentioned two, the public safety retirement system and the correction officer. We do have liabilities for former judges and people like that. Where is that?
At this time, we're only addressing PRS and Corp. Those are the two that are most concerned for us. I don't have
you don't have any concern in the other?
elected official. Actually, let me let the expert talk about it here.
All right.
Michael.
Okay.
Hold on.
Well, hold on. That's one. Hold on. Just one at a time. You have a comment?
Yeah, so for the public, I want the public, before we get started and people get, kind of excited about the numbers they're going to hear, this is not Yuma County's fault.
Oh, I was going to say that.
It was, 7 years ago, we were like 80% funded, and the legislature, quote unquote, fixed it. Now we're at 40%. Yuma County paid its bill in full, as was requested by these pension funds. We don't have any control over what they request. We don't have any control over the assumptions they made. When we found out last year the kind of assumptions they had been making, it was outrageous. So I just want the public to understand this has nothing to do with Yuma County and Yuma County not fulfilling its obligations. It has to do with factors far beyond our control.
No. Supervisor McLeod, I was hoping for that to be part of the presentation.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean,
The administrator was going to provide us.
Okay. I also wanted to add before the presentation that just the fact that Yuma County is trying to do this may not solve the problem itself. It may be just way too big. I mean, if we have Maricopa County and Pima County in these plans and they don't do something to deal with this issue, we're not, I know for us $25 million or $29 million or whatever that is, it's a lot of money. It is a lot of money. But the fact is that this pension plan is $1 billion pension plan. It's not a small pension plan. We may make about 5%, maybe 6 or 7, maybe even a little bit more. But I suppose that's going to be part of the presentation. So I should stop and let you guys do the
Mr.
presentation.
Chairman, this is the reason why we structured
That's
this
why the
this
meetings go
way.
long. I don't even let you guys start. All right.
All right. And after Mr. Townsend is done, we're going to have a proposal from Stifel, the Stifel team, so we can address a proposed pension plan to issue some bond.
Gil, as time goes by, you're going to learn that everything you plan for can be derailed by any one of us. So, yeah, I know you're trying to stick to a script. I'm sorry about that.
Chair Reyes, members of the board, thank you. I'll answer the question first about the elected officials.
No problem.
So you do have liability in the elected officials plan. The elected officials plan is what we refer to as a pooled plan, so all the liabilities are combined together. So it actually wouldn't serve Yuma County or Yuma County taxpayers to pay additional contribution towards that because it's all pooled together. Whereas your deputy sheriffs and correction officers are actually separate plans that you alone are responsible for your liability. And that's the reason that we're discussing those specifically here today.
Oh, so that means that, so I see. So it means that this one here is a combined situation where if everybody, well, not everybody has to solve everybody else's problem. We have to solve our problem, and everybody else needs to solve their problems, but that's are you saying that's our obligation, as opposed to, the elected officials plan where it's everybody's obligation to try to make up the difference.
That's
which
correct.
in some ways is going to be the same, but different.
And
Take it off, it's okay.
Take
It's
this
fine.
off briefly.
Yeah.
It's just, my name's Mike Townsend. I'm the administrator for PSPRS. I spent the previous 20 years in Coconino County. I recognize a lot of the faces from the legislative summit that CSA puts on every year.
How do you do that? We don't even, we have masks on. Oh, it's okay.
Oh, no, I remember the faces.
But you can leave it
You
off.
can leave it off, Mike, it's
Okay,
fine.
okay.
Just don't get any closer.
And really, I mean, the questions, I appreciate the comments, I appreciate the questions, which is really the reason that I decided to take this job, because I was frustrated when I was at Coconino County asking questions and trying to figure out where are these liabilities coming from and how does this work? And I didn't get answers. I had to actually go figure it out for myself. And that's the reason that I'm going around talking to the different jurisdictions to explain this, because this is a huge problem, as was mentioned. I mean, we have about $11 billion in assets, and we have about $11 billion in unfunded liabilities. And for the state of Arizona, that's a huge number. That's a huge impact to the economy. And so whatever we can do to come up with solutions for this is going to be important. But the math is so big that you have to get an understanding, because until you get an understanding of what's here, you're not really sure what it is you're trying to resolve. And so that's why I really want to go through this and get to kind of an understanding, talk about the basic terminology, what happened in the past to get us there, what's taken place so far to correct this, and then what the future is, what considerations we have as we go forward. So again, that passes the long-term impacts, how we got there, the present, and then the future, looking for those opportunities and solutions. Because really, I think looking at and I appreciate being invited here to have this discussion today, because that's the first part of that, is to get an understanding of where we are so you're comfortable with what's taken place over the past couple of years, so that then you can focus and look at what to do going forward into the future. So how did we get here? In terms of the past, the largest impact is what's referred to as the PBI, which is a permanent benefit increase. And the structure of this, now this was a design of how to provide cost of living increases to retirees. The structure of this created issues that continue to build over time. So what would happen was any investment returns above 9%, half of that amount above 9% was actually taken out of the trust. So those are assets that were taken away from funding the liability. In addition to taking those away, anything that was below the assumed rate of return, so if we had losses, 100% of the losses would stay in the trust. We kept all the losses, but only got half of the excess returns. So it was really hard to increase the assets over time. The double impact of this is that as those monies were taken out of the trust, those were used to give cost of living increases, which increased the liabilities. So we decreased the assets and increased the liabilities at the same time. And then there's a disproportionate impact of that, which usually had an impact in rural areas. So the way the PBI would work was they would calculate a percentage up to a 4% maximum on the total payroll for the pension. And then they would distribute that evenly to every person that was retired. So even if you had a very low pension, which was based on your income, you would actually get a higher percentage increase. And so in the rural areas, the percentage increases to liabilities through the cost of living mechanism had a larger impact on lower wage employees. So there was a disproportionate impact across the state. The other thing that happened was how this was accounted for in the actuarial assumptions. And Supervisor McLeod, to your comment, how this grew over time, is the actuaries had a basic assumption for most of these years that there would be no PBIs paid out, because their assumption was the investments would always earn the assumed rate of return. There would never be any excess earnings. Therefore, there would never be a PBI given, except it was done for 28 consecutive years. So just the fact that it took so long to figure out what the impact was and why these kept growing was part of the problem. And then also the investment impacts. Once they started to realize that impact of that above 9%, they changed the investment portfolio to be less volatile. When you're less volatile, you're not getting the upside, you're not getting the downside, but it really, it limited the total returns that the system could receive. And so we're also going through a process of changing the asset allocation on the investment side. So here, just kind of what happened and then what changes. So the PBI was changed back in 2010 by the legislature, and then we had the Hall and Fields cases that said that was unconstitutional and had to be paid back. And Prop 124 and 125, that actually went to the voters, and the voters approved eliminating the PBI. So now the PBI is gone. And in place is a 2% COLA. It's formula driven, but it's something that's more sustainable. It's something that's more definable for the actuary, so we know what the costs are going forward. Actuarial assumptions, so getting rid of the PBI helped with that. The board actually last month voted to change some of the other actuarial assumptions to be more conservative and to pay down the unfunded liabilities over time, over a shorter period of time. Investment allocations, we have a new investment allocation, so we are getting back to looking at all those different asset classes because we're not limited on the upside. All of the upside we get to keep in the trust. And so we need to take advantage of those, and there's been a lot of staff changes on the investment side as well. And please, if there's questions as I'm going through, I'm trying to be respectful of your time. I know you have some long meetings every day, so. So kind of the past of what happened with the PBI, of how we got here. So more in the present, what else has happened over the past couple of years, along with the propositions approved by the voters, there was pension reform at the legislature, and they created what we refer to as Tier 3. So for the public safety, there are no longer any new employees, new hires do not go into Tiers 1 and 2. Those are closed systems. So we're not growing that population. We cannot take those benefits away because of the pension clause, but we're not growing the members in those groups. And so Tier 3 has a cost share 50-50 between the employer and the employee. And so that's a lower employer cost tier. And so the important thing to remember is the pension reforms created the new tier, but they could not reduce the costs of Tiers 1 and 2. That's what we refer to as the legacy cost that has to be paid. Also in the present, a lot of things internally have taken place at PSPRS. My colleague, Mr. Reeder, made a comment to me earlier. This is kind of like a sports team, right? That comes in last place for multiple years. New management, new coaches, you turn it over, it's still the same name, but it's a very different group. I was hired last December, so I'm coming up on my first year. When I came in, we were in the middle of an audit and found some problems. The general ledger system was not functioning properly. We didn't have the proper controls in place. We have implemented a new general ledger system. We have changed the internal control structure. We've hired new auditors. They're working on our audit right now. Hired new leadership positions. I hired a deputy administrator. I hired Michael Smerick as my deputy administrator. He has 20 years of experience working with the Department of Administration. He was the deputy state comptroller for most of that time. Hired a new CFO, a controller, an internal auditor. The internal audit position had been vacant for over a year. So she is on board. The actuaries, we hired the new actuaries that created the modelers that employers can use to model different scenarios about how to take care of that legacy debt that needs to be taken care of. We've upgraded the computer systems, looking for investment opportunities as we revise that asset allocation model. The board adopted the actuarial changes I mentioned to help pay down the liabilities on a little more aggressive cycle. And then also the advisory committee. In terms of stakeholder engagement, we re-engaged the advisory committee. That advisory committee is made up of employers and members. Specifically, we have representatives on there from the League of Cities and Towns and the County Supervisors Association. Craig Sullivan sits on that advisory committee. And we've worked with them over the past several months and actually had a recommendation from them to help the boards in support of those actuarial changes to get us on the right track. Okay, so talked a little about the past, how we got here, the present, some of the changes that have taken place. Now, some understanding about how things work to get an understanding of how do we come up with solutions going forward. So to make sure, I kind of start at the beginning on understanding pensions because it gets complicated very quickly, but from a high level, it makes a lot of sense. So for a defined benefit, there's an actual benefit that's going to be paid, there's a formula. The problem is we're trying to estimate what that's going to be. We don't know how long someone's going to work. We don't know what their pay is going to be when they retire. We don't know how long they're going to live in retirement. So it's all based on these actuarial assumptions, the estimates. How do we estimate what is the present value? And it's very important to understand when we look at the assets, so how we calculate the unfunded liability, when we look at the assets, What's the market value today? So we want to know what are the asset values today. In terms of the liabilities, the actuaries look at those individuals and they say, well, what have they earned as a 10-year employee? How long are they going to work? And how much of that benefit have they earned over 10 years? And what are those string of payments going to be for their lifetime and their survivor if there's an estimate for a surviving spouse? All of those future string of payments are discounted back to a present value. And this is kind of the key to the math and understanding kind of where these issues come from and what solutions are there. The liabilities are today's dollars. It's a present value calculation. And so the difference between today's value of assets and today's value of liabilities is how we come up with what is the unfunded portion. And we talk about funded percentage. If it's 50% funded, then it's a simple, just using the same two numbers in terms of the assets and the present value of the liabilities. This is a breakdown so you can see kind of where you are compared to all the other plans that are in PSPRS. And this is, as I said, from a high level, the pensions are pretty simple. The right side is what I refer to as the uses. So the benefits that are going to be paid out, what's that present value number? The expenses are the cost of running PSPRS, the agency. And then the left side are the sources of money. And so the investment income is what we're earning on the assets every year, and then contributions. And this is a very simple formula, and it's something that I think you need to focus on is that's it. There's no other source, there's no other slush fund anywhere. It either comes from contributions or it's investment returns. And we can only do so much with investment returns because we can try to tweak the percentage a little bit. But really, the only way to get additional investment income is to have more contributions put into the system. So the more money here, the more opportunity there is for investment returns, because that's really where it's going to come from. And so there is a formula. Those pensions are going to be paid, and it really is a debt. It's not a soft liability. There's really dollars that are going to be paid out. It is owed. And as we go through this, the amounts and the timing of the contributions are going to have a direct impact. And so the way that I try to frame this is to think of this: every additional dollar contributed today provides investment earnings into the future. So there's an opportunity cost there too, because every additional dollar that's not put in the system is not going to be earning those investment returns over time. Okay. So as we look at, when you work with Stiefel and they come up with their ideas around different options, you need to understand there's two parts to the contributions. The first ones we'll refer to as normal costs. I gave an example of a 10-year employee has earned a portion of their future pension string of payments. In the year 11, this is the current year, that 11th year is going to add another little percentage. So what they're earning in the current year, that's what we refer to as normal cost. Now, if you have an unfunded liability, there's a portion of the contributions that pay for that. And so there's the unfunded liability portion of the contributions. And that's, if you think of a mortgage on a house, we amortize it in terms of what's the mortgage payment to pay down that unfunded liability. Those two numbers together are how we calculate the contributions that are needed for each employer. This is a breakdown of the entire system. PSPRS, I'm going to go to some Yuma specific numbers. So system-wide, you can see when we're a little bit below 50% funded, you can see the contributions are proportionally more than what we get from investment returns, which would make sense, right? We're missing a lot of assets in terms of being fully funded, so where's the money going to come from? It's going to come from contributions. Okay, so now we're going to get a little more specific with Yuma County. This is looking at the sheriff's deputy plan, but the math works the same. So for the pension side, it's going to be very simple. So to give you a picture of where you are, you can see the total present value of the liabilities is that total bar. It's at $43 million of a total liability. So the present value of those future string of benefits. And then the blue are the assets, just over 22 million. And so that simple math gives you an unfunded of almost $21 million. Okay, so that's a picture to help you kind of visualize how this works. So the important thing, because the liabilities, if you look at this, the last bullet down here, the liabilities are a present value. So when we get to next year, that present value is going to be discounted one less year. In essence, it's going to grow by 7.3%. because that's the discount rate that's used. So just if you can, as we go through these, we're going to visualize. I'm going to get you a picture here in just a minute to show how this works. So the left side are the assets. And for this 1 year, the ARC to be contributed, the contribution's about $2.5 million, and then a little over $1.5 million in terms of investment returns if we return the 7.3 assumed rate of return. Those two numbers together, investments and contributions, would add $4.1 million to this plan in 1 year, okay, which sounds good. That's a lot of money. When you look at the right side, the liabilities, discounted one less year from the starting to the next, the present value of the liabilities is going to increase $3.1 million. So you think we paid $4 million, but you're really only catching up $1 million towards that unfunded. And this is what's really important about that present value calculation. What does that number really mean, and how do you get to where you can start to pay this down? So this is a picture of what I just walked through. So the 2019 were the same numbers from the other slide. The right side is 1 year later, and you can see up on top, the total liabilities increased. And then you had the blue are your assets that you started with, and then the orange and the gray are the investment returns and the contributions. So you can see, even though your assets are increasing, the total liabilities are increasing also. So you're really chasing, because it's a present value, you're really chasing those liabilities into the future. And so this is from the actuarial estimates for fiscal year 2020 that showed what the investment returns, the cash coming in would be about 40% from investment returns. All those contributions would be the remainder. So about 60% of the cash coming in would be from contributions. So a hypothetical, if it were 100% funded, 77% of the cash each year would be coming from the investments. And that's that opportunity cost. So where's the money? If it doesn't come from the investments, it has to come from the contribution side. And that's that formula again. And I had the actuaries run this number.
Before you leave
Yes.
that, can you go back a little bit to that pie? Now, when you say normal cost, is that what is supposed to be coming from the Yuma County contribution itself?
Yes. The employee is the portion that fixed in tiers 1 and 2, it's fixed for the employee. So so those two together represent the normal cost. So the total normal cost less the 10% that comes from the employee, and then that's what.
And this obviously is not talking about what the percentage the employee contributes from his salary. This is just simply talking about the percentage that is paid through that contribution, right?
Of the total cash coming in, 10% of it came from the employee. Yes, yes, you're correct.
Yeah, I didn't want to make this, or somebody looking at it thinking, well, from that point on, only 10% has to come from the employee.
Right,
That's
right.
not the case. This is just a cumulative amount that comes from those contributions. It doesn't have anything to do with what percentage they pay.
You are correct.
Okay, got it.
I just wanted to go over this last bullet here briefly. So the actuaries calculated. So most plans are on a 17-year amortization going down to 16 years the next year. But if there's $1 million additional contributions above the annually required contributions put in, that would actually result in a savings of $1.8 million over the 17 years. And then at the end of that time, that original $1 million is still in there. So you still have the opportunity for investment returns on that going forward also. So you can see that over time, having money up front, again, that formula, the C plus I, anything we can get in up front to take advantage of investment returns over the long term really helps this formula work. And this is some of the changes around the asset allocation. And this is to demonstrate kind of what the plan is. So that as we've turned over, we have new board members, new staff, a new chief investment officer. In the past, some of the investments, whether it was real estate, the dot-com bubble, they were trying to pick winners and losers. There's a lot of people on Wall Street that go bankrupt every year trying to do that. It doesn't work. This is a study that shows in terms of investment returns, 92% of what you earn in investment returns is by asset allocation, getting in the right different sectors of investments. And so that's what our focus has been on, investment allocation. The top green one is kind of what those asset classes are. The first column, the column of the numbers, the policy. And then what we're switching to is the mix number 2 plus 10% leverage. And so we're looking at how do we transition that. one thing we don't want to do, especially in terms of some of our private equity, private credit, which are some long-term investments. We don't want to sell those off at a loss just to go jump right to this asset allocation. So how are we transitioning to get there over time and still take advantage of the assets that we're invested in right now? And so that's one of the big changes that has also taken place. More of the total economy focused. This is here just for you. There's a link that walks through how the investments work at PSPRS. There's additional information if you are interested.
Okay. All right. Any comments? I think the core of the presentation is, look, if you have an opportunity right now to cover that deficit that we're running in, do it if you can, because it's going to get worse as it goes on through the years. And it's just the magic of compound interest, I would call it, right? I mean, it's just that if you have $1 million and you invest it, you know, it will be $1 million point something tomorrow, and it will be $1 million point something else the next day, because of the next year, because it will be the added investment of what you gain.
Sure,
The same
that's
thing,
exactly it.
Yeah,
That's exactly
and it works the same way with the deficit.
But
if
I
you
think
don't
part of this
cover it.
too, because I worked on this with the Coconino County Board, obviously.
That was the easy one.
That was the easy one, yeah. And then I also worked with the city of Flagstaff. But really, because the math will make sense. The math either works or it doesn't work, right? The hard part is getting, because you're also going to have to talk to your constituents about this. And they're going to ask questions. Well, how did this happen? What are we doing to make sure it's not going to happen again? So, and that's kind of where I come in is, that's why I want you to understand it's me. I understand your issues. I'm coming from the same position because this is the problem I was trying to solve. But the changes we're trying to put the changes in place to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
The main question I have, and I'll get back to you right away, but the main question I have is, say the Coconino County, which is the easy one as I call it, and us, we decide, okay, we're going to cure this. Basically, we're going to cure this deficit right now so we don't have a worse one in the future. So we're trying to solve a problem. You know, we can explain how it happened because we think, well, we can explain the recession, we can explain optimistic projections, we can explain the, you know, wrong investments, we can explain a lot of that because it happens to people who are investing. You know, they make projections. I mean, if you make a 28-year projection without projecting a recession, it's just pretty damn stupid. I mean, we know it's cyclic. So let's just say that we can explain that, and we can get to the point where we say, okay, well, this is a wise investment because it's all going to be an investment. It's an investment of making sure that we don't end up with a worse problem in the future, and we leave that to a future generation of board leaders or whatever. So, and we make sure, and this is probably the most critical part, we make sure that people who count on their retirement will have their retirement, you know, and that it will be a healthy situation where they don't have to sort of scrunch along. The next question that I have, and the only question that I have really actually about this is, I think I understand it pretty thoroughly. It's what happens if the big ones don't come in with their part? Will that damage the pension plan so badly that it doesn't matter what some of us do to solve it? You know, I understood from the beginning, that's what I said. I understood from the beginning that everybody has their own liabilities, right? This is one of those separate ones, whatever. But all of us should understand that the pension plan is the pension plan. It's not Yuma County's pension plan, Coconino County's. It is the PSRP. It is one pension fund. So if we say we contribute what we have to, we cover our deficit, we're healthy. And there's 15 counties, let's just do 15 counties. And 10 counties decide that they can't. You know, that some of them may want to, but they can't. What happens then? Can a single county be successful, or 2 or 3 counties be successful with their part, and irrespective of whether the other counties come through?
A lot of questions in there.
Oh,
actually.
yeah, I think it was just one, but I didn't get to
your money it's your money. So we're pooling it together in terms of investments. But when you put your money in, that goes to Yuma County, and that's going to go to pay the benefits for your employees you're retiring.
Okay.
Your money is not going to go to solve somebody else's problem. Right. Okay. That's the important one. The other thing to remember is the Board of Trustees have put in place. They just adopted changes to some of the actuarial assumption changes, but the big one that they put in place, which most people don't understand, was they changed the amortization method for the unfunded liabilities. And it's going to start to work its way down to a shorter period of time. And what that does is increase contributions on the short side. So eventually, we're going to get to a point where even these large jurisdictions, whether they say they can or they can't, they're going to have to start putting more money into the contributions. Part of this, well, because what it does is we're shifting it. You got to put more up front, and so they're shortening that time frame.
Does that change if we decide to balance our or to cover our deficit? Would that mean that we would not be exposed to those increases?
That's correct, because that amortization is on the unfunded liability. If you pay down and your unfunded liability is zero, it doesn't matter what they change that amortization to.
Right. Okay. Got it.
Yes. Yes.
That's
So
good.
yeah, so they're taking steps to make sure that we're going to get there, because it's a closed system, and at some point, tiers 1 and 2 are all going to be retired. We've got to get the money into the system, and so the board is changing to make sure that the time horizons on the actuarials reflect that.
Right.
Now, if you look at your solution, and I know the big thing is well, what's my cash flow if I do nothing, and what's my cash flow if I do option 1 or option 2, and then you can start to make decisions. But yes, but your money is your money when it goes into the system. So EORP, everything is pooled together. You're a piece of the total pie for Arizona. You don't have your own.
All right. Got it. Okay, that answers the question.
Okay.
Any other questions? Comments?
Russell,
Oh, you
for
have
me.
Sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead. He's going to think about.
Well, I just had a couple of things. One, Mark, I want to tell you, I've heard nothing but good things about you and your team coming out of
He's a member
this
that we
state
have in the pension plan.
Thank you. I appreciate
you
it.
guys have taken over, so I compliment you on that. And I just wanted to verify, this funding, it's only going for tier 1 and 2. Tier 3 is a total separate entity. It's its own funding right now. So everything that we're putting in, this 29 million, is just strictly for tier 1 and 2 to balance out what's in there now.
Yeah, Chair Reyes and Supervisor Simmons, that's correct. That is just tiers 1 and 2. Tier 3 is actually a pooled system. And so you're going to be pooled together with others. It'll work like EOR.
Okay.
It'll work like ASRS.
ASRS is another example, yes.
All right. Comment, Supervisor McCullough.
You know, I was going to make the same comment. I've heard very, very good things. I want to thank you for the presentation. It was clear and understandable. And, you know, you exude confidence. And I know that Greg Sullivan speaks highly of you and your team. And so I just want to thank you for that. And I'm glad this is getting taken care of. I can't believe it was so bad for so long. So,
Yeah, that's what happens when.
it was 10 years ago the legislature fixed it. Time flies. I thought it was more like 7 or 8.
Just before the big recession. All right. And this pandemic is only making it so more obvious. All right. Thank you, Mark. Does anybody have any additional presentation, Gil? Do we get to hear from our consultants?
Sherman, yes. Next, we're going to hear from our consultant, Stifel. They're going to give us a proposal how we can address this unfunded liability. Mark?
So, other than the percentage, which is 2 point something. All right. Give your presentation here.
Thank you, Mr. Villegas. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Reyes, members of the board, good morning. Thank you for having us. And I was going to ask Mike if he wanted to go back and get his Coconino County job back. But he's really, we've been working with Mike, I think, as you all know, for the last 6 months, and done a great job, and he's transparent. And it's really nice to see the ability of Mike to come in the room and help educate and bring you all back up to speed on this problem, which is not Yuma County's fault, right? Mike mentioned this, in our counties in the state are about 1.2 billion. I'm rounding numbers as of 19, roughly 1.2 billion. Okay? So all of our 15 counties have a tier 1, tier 2 unfunded liability, constitutionally protected. All the things that Mr. Townsend mentioned. There are cities that are 7 billion. We have fire districts that have an unfunded UAAL or unfunded liability, as Mike mentioned to you. And the state has a pretty significant unfunded tier 1, tier 2 PSPRS unfunded liability. A lot of it driven by the variables that Mr. Townsend mentioned to you, including the PBI situation that came on the books. And so losses were incurred, as you all know, as a result of that, and the liability increased, and now we're having to deal with it.
So that's kind of, as I've gotten in the room over the last 9 months, what I've learned over the last 9 months here in Arizona. Just real quick, and I'm going to try to get through this in 15 minutes because I know it's been a long day for you. We did our first pension bond, I think as you all know, back in July with the City of Flagstaff. City of Flagstaff called us. They were very frustrated with their $121 million unfunded liability. This all started back in February, prior to COVID, and they were trying to figure it out, and they were throwing more contributions at it, right? You have your annual required contribution from PSPRS, and our counties and our cities, if their budget allows, can throw additional contributions, as Mr. Townsend was mentioning. Contributions plus investment income, remember, equals benefits and expenses. So for those cities, counties, agencies, if you will, that had extra budget capacity, they were throwing more money at it as best they could under their policy, but they were still doing negative amortization as a result. So they wanted to fix it. Tier 1, Tier 2 legacy issue on the book. So I had never, in my 30-year career here in Arizona representing all of you, never done a pension bond, so I brought in my 2 colleagues from Chicago who are on the phone, Omar and Claude. I'm going to go ahead and go through the presentation and then maybe have them comment if necessary. So I just kind of wanted to share with you that we've been making a lot of progress addressing this issue. Started with Flagstaff, and now many jurisdictions have called us asking us how this might work. So I just wanted to lay that background for you. Okay, page 1, we have some hard copies. I don't know if they're handed out. I'll go quickly. And Gail, this thing's off a little bit here, so I'm going to do my best. We got 2 slides here, so I don't. There we go. Okay, so Yuma County, Tier 1, Tier 2, not Tier 3. Good questions by the board, by the way. Sheriff, all around 21 million as of June 30, 19 actuarial reports that come out from PSPRS. Court detention, 8.6 million. Sheriff is 51% funded, accruing at 7.3% to PSPRS. So essentially that is a liability on your books accruing at 7.3%. That's one of the reasons why this liability continues to grow. It's an unfunded liability at 7.3%. Same thing here, 7.3, a little better on corp detention, 64% funded, 51% funded. To give you an idea, on the Flagstaff situation, they were 33% funded. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear. The accrual rate of 7.3%, that's in the unfunded liability accrual, right? So that's how much that's increasing annually, right? Just want to make sure that was clear.
That's the actuarial rate of return that changes each year based on
actual return.
Work with his actuaries, you guys understand that. Okay. So when we started talking to the county administration, Mr. Villegas and Mrs. Thorpe and Mr. McGay, last month or so, we're 29.5 million unfunded. On your balance sheet, you probably recognize that number. Okay. Now over here, this is the complications of pensions. The numbers are constantly changing based on reports. We just last week got the new, what they call GASB 68 report that updates the June 30, 19. Okay, just timing differences associated with investment returns and closing the books, if you will, on the pension fund and the assets that your county has, specific assets. And we're adjusting that by about 2.9 million June 30, 19. So just want to share with you how these things change, and the good news is we got the latest numbers. The bad news is it's up 2.9 million. So our unfunded actuarial liability just went up, and I think we're about, when we add these two up, about 32.5 million as we speak. Okay?
That's not okay, but.
All right, yeah, we're going to go over the amortization period here shortly.
You actually need to change that from the city's budget to the county's budget, but that's fine.
Mark, I think you need to let our.
Oh,
yeah. Amelia.
Thank you. I didn't know that. Okay. Thank you.
Put the second one on.
Okay. So.
The second one. That one.
Thank you. We'll go to the second one here. So obviously you've entered into an amortization period with PSPRS to pay back the unfunded, right? And that is the amount that you budget for each year. I'm going to walk you through that here in a moment. And this is simply a slide of what I just went over here. So I think I'm going to move on
from this to the third page, please. That's just additional data for you. Okay, I'm going to park here for just a moment, and I'm going to again try to go very fast. In the first column here, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is your total payroll. Okay, now here's a little bit of good news. This comes from Mike's, from the actuarial reports from PSPRS. They get your payroll data, obviously. And you can see that we're feeling a little bit better about total payroll because some of the tier 1, tier 2 folks are coming off payroll and we're converting to tier 3. Okay? So one of the good news about the reform that Mike mentioned, Prop 124, was we now no longer have tier 1, tier 2 pensions, guaranteed pensions. Now we're into more of a sharing program. So the good news here is we see some, all in all, good news there. Here's your normal costs we talked about for your pension costs. Here's a percentage of your payroll. And then now we have the boogeyman in the closet. The boogeyman in the closet is $32.5 million between the two plans. This is the amortization schedule for just sheriff. This is tier 1, tier 2. We're going into $1.3 million this year. Next year, based on the most recent numbers, including the numbers we got last week, it'll be $1 million going to $1.5 million. And you can see the trajectory here of the liability based on the actuarial calculations. Going to 4.9 all around to $5 million. Now, interestingly enough, we're seeing this all around the state. Flagstaff was no different than this, interestingly enough. 3.5 times, your amortization payments are going up 3.5 times as indicated right here. So if the county does nothing at all, you decide not to address this through a pension bond financing, which we'll talk about here in a moment, then one of your options is to continue to make your UAAL amortization payments and throw as much general fund money at it as you can each year. Okay? So this has been a little bit of an eye-opener. Yes,
I have a question.
Mr. McLeod.
So on the amortization, why does it rise each year instead of starting out, at $2 million next year?
Thank you.
Because it would be paid off quicker.
Yeah, it would be. That line would shift, and what that would do is you'd have a pretty dramatic impact to your current year's budget, where you would have huge increases in that. The reason is many years ago, the actuary structured this to be what they call the level percent of pay. So as your payroll would grow, they were targeting the same percentage of contributions each year. So as your payroll would grow, the total dollars would grow. So it was intended to look like that. The problem is when you get to a very large unfunded liability, the slope of the line gets to where it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So it's first that method of level percent of pay that was started, but then as the unfunded grew, it started to escalate the slope of that line.
Yeah, because you can look at the next column, percent of payroll, it becomes astronomical.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
So I just was curious why they did it that way instead of putting a little bit more up front.
I talked about the change to the amortization method. And so any new unfunded liabilities that are created, whether it's investment risk or actuarial risk going forward, all of those new unfunded liabilities are going to be on a level dollar. So it's going to be the same amount each year.
Mm.
So that's one of the changes the board made because it makes more sense and you're paying it down more consistent over time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, page, so all good on that page. That's sheriff, and then this is the same, except this is corp. We wanted to share with you, and you can see, 565 up to $1.6 million in terms of that growing liability in that column there, UAAL. Okay, next page, please. What we did here, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, is we just simply rolled those up because they're your liability, and so this would be your payments going forward here. On both those plans, going up to $6.6 million, and of course somewhere around $325 right there is your future payments at the moment based on the most recent actuarial. Okay? Any questions on that? So far, so good?
Yeah.
Okay, so then on this slide here, we just kind of chatted about this. What do our clients do out there, policy-wise, budget-wise, and all that? And again, you really have 2 or 3 options. Number one there, we say do nothing. and go ahead and address this over the years and throw more money at it. I think what Mr. Townsend was mentioning, based on this new amortization schedule to try to smooth out that trajectory that we talked about, is they're going to come out and increase those payments on you, it sounds like, so that they can help address that issue for those who don't address this based on a pension bond. Okay. Number 2, amend the current PSPRS policy and budget more dollars. That's what we talked about. Will some jurisdiction have to have a tax associated with that? Maybe. Obviously, all jurisdictions try to avoid that. I think, you know, Prescott did have an election to address this. They got a 1% sales tax a couple of years ago to their credit. They're about the only one that I know of working around the state that has decided to do a tax adjustment, one fashion, form, or another. Flagstaff implemented a use tax that they hadn't had before. It generated $600 grand a year. They threw that at it, so they were trying to address it through that. But beyond that, we're not seeing a whole lot of tax increases at the moment to address this liability. So, and the third one really is to maybe consider what we're going to share with you, and that is to do a pension bond, pension financing, in which we would refinance out the PSPRS liability,
32 mil.
and change your amortization. I'll walk you through that in a moment and show you what the implications of that potential option is for you. Okay? Next page. Interest rates. No secret to the board. I want to say the 30-year mortgage is down to 2.875, something like that from what I heard. So as you all know, at the moment, we're at near all-time historical low rates. I would say that's probably the only positive thing out of COVID. Maybe some federal money coming our way, which has been nice, as you all know, on the CARES Relief Act. I think having some federal money has been helpful to us, but we're at all-time lows. When Flagstaff did their transaction in July, the 10-year U.S. Treasury, which is a benchmark we all use, was a 0.59% at an all-time, I think, low. We've creeped up a little bit on the right-hand side, but we're still somewhere around 0.7, something like that. So Flagstaff was opportunistic. They met with Mr. Townsend and his colleagues on the investment side and the actuarial side. We got to get comfortable with that. We'll walk you through that in a moment. And based on Mike's leadership and the changes that Mike is making, his transparency, they got comfortable on that side. And then when they communicated with us on the debt side at really they ended up getting 2.69% long-term 20-year bonds. So they swapped the 730 liability for a 2.69 and did some other things that worked with them very well. So I know you're aware of that. All right, so let's go to the next page. Thank you. Okay, do you like our charts a little better than Mike's, or how we doing all right? We got a little color and all that stuff. The red line on the right-hand side is what we just went over. There's your PSPRS amortization schedules. The blue line is potentially what your new debt service structure would look like to help stabilize this annual payment. And I'm going to walk you through the numbers here in a moment. The green line is savings. So if you swap out the 730 and we get you the high 2s, low 3% money. This is a scenario here, just bear with us on this, where we'd probably issue somewhere around 34 million, and we would wire 33.7 to PSPRS, at which time your county would be 100% funded on Tier 1, Tier 2. So that amortization that we talked about goes away. So that's probably, that's the good news, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of our clients are looking at this option very seriously. So I just wanted to give you an idea. We're coming in somewhere around 283 money, bear with us on that. Taxable money, because it's a pension refinancing. And under this scenario, there could be about $17.8 million of net present value savings. So very, very significant potential savings for the county by swapping out your liabilities here. Okay, next page. Okay, we worked with staff on this, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and this can be tweaked or changed any way you want if you elect to move forward. This was graphed on the previous page, but I like to kind of go to the numbers here. Here's our PSPRS, right? You recognize that, the red line on the two plans. We would issue the new bonds. We pay all of this off. This goes away. And we issue new bonds at the high 2, low 3% money. We shorten the amortization, okay? And we get you level debt right around 2.8 million without exceeding what the current PSPRS amortization is, okay? So when we ran this, I personally like this for the county, and again, you can, but it shortens it, and this allows for budget stability going forward rather than this. That make sense? Okay? Now, just real quick, if we do this and we go 100% funded, okay, now going forward, if there are actuarial misses, either on the investment side of the equation or on the actuarial side of the equation, there could be the potential of their UAAL going back up again. Fair? This thing, it's a big liability. We're going 100%. If we meet our 7.3% return and nothing happens significantly on the actuarial side, people living longer, people retiring sooner, all the things that impact those actuarial cash flow numbers in the future, then there's the potential that we're going to have to, each budget year, analyze the results of the actuarial reports. For some reason, I got to fly. I don't.
Yes, Vice President.
Mr. Pence the other night.
Mr. Pence sent it over.
At least it's not landing up in here. So.
Yeah, it's not white up
Okay.
there,
So I think
Nowhere land.
you all are with me. We have good news. We're 100% funded. 2 years from now, there's an issue. There's an investment issue. There's an actuarial issue. We get our reports from PSPRS and their actuaries, Foster and Foster, and hypothetically, the county owes $2 million, hypothetically. Okay? And we showed you, just by way of example, on the first slide, the adjustment we're making right now. It's about 2.9 million, remember? We're hoping those stop. We're hoping that that type of thing stop, but give you an idea. So let's say we're hypothetically 2 million, what do?
You go to the contingency reserve fund.
Okay, we got to sit down and address it. And you have a couple options. You can enter into another amortization schedule like we have now. Certainly no problem with that. Or we can advance the unfunded liability in cash out of our budget. And so one of the things that we're going to propose or throw out to the board and to staff as you continue to manage this legacy liability that you're trying to fix as a board is to set aside a contingency reserve fund. And my colleagues Omar and Claude introduced this to Flagstaff, to their city council, and it's sized based on actuarial and investment potential misses based on history. And we size it accordingly. We bring it to the board adopts it as a contingency reserve fund policy. In Flagstaff, they sized up $13 million in their case, roughly 10% of the transaction. They funded it out of the proceeds of the bonds, and they're going to set it aside with a policy, and they're going to have that money available each budget year to address any potential continued unfunded misses. And so I would say that's been very well embraced across the state. We're doing $16 million in pension bonds for Gila next week. We had the same conversation with them. Gila wants to establish a contingency reserve fund. They're not going to do it out of their bond funds because they've got a fairly healthy general fund. They're going to transfer it essentially from the general fund. They're going to put a little gate around it over here. They do have a very well-written policy on it, and that's how they're going to address the contingency reserve fund so they can manage this in the future.
And from the head waving of the staff, I think that's what they're leaning on.
Okay. So I just wanted to introduce that to the board. Good policy. The rating agencies like it. We don't have it incorporated into the bond issue now, but we will coming forward if that's the desire. So back to this. There's our level debt at 2.8. Next slide is the contingency reserve fund that I shared with you. Hope that was helpful. And then the following slide is pension bond risks. So if the county moves forward with this restructuring, for lack of a better term, 100% funded, and we wire the $33.5 million to PSPRS, the risk of doing a pension bond is if PSPRS return goes south of our borrowing cost. So our current numbers show about 2.85% taxable borrowing cost. And if we think on the investment side of the equation, on what Mike and his staff are doing relative to the large amounts of money they get to manage their pension go south, then we probably shouldn't be doing a pension bond. There's a smoothing return that they use at about 7.2% return right now. And what most of our clients have gotten comfortable with over the past 6 months and talking to Mike and his staff and trying to evaluate the direction they're going, the new direction they're going, that they've gotten comfortable with the fact that PSPRS will be able to return something greater than 3% in our example. And if not, obviously, I think we're going to have some greater problems in the world. So I just wanted to share it with the board. Obviously, if we do this, we wire the money and there's a big market correction or down the road we can't meet our returns, then it's not something that we should do. So that's the primary risk really of doing a pension bond versus not doing a pension bond.
What happens if the returns are higher? What happens if the returns are higher? Does that money go back to reducing the liability itself?
Right, so on that one there, Mike, so if we're 100% funded and a year from now the returns are higher, might you maybe help us with that one?
It'll reduce the.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I think, but I
Yeah,
just want to make sure.
it stays in your plan, and it
Okay.
would actually be above 100% funded. So, and what it does is it creates what's referred to as a stability reserve. And so then for future years, if there are different changes as the estimates change going forward through time, that money's there to pay down. So it stays.
That
in
in
your
itself would become the contingency reserve fund in itself.
plan. Yes.
All right, Supervisor McLeod?
To that question, would the employer contributions then drop if you go above 100% funded?
No, that was one of the changes with pension reform, is that you're required to continue paying the normal cost, and which I think is a good thing. When you get to 100% funded, remember, that's 100% today. There's still a lot of unknowns for many decades about what's going to happen. So it's actually better to keep paying. You start to get a little bit ahead, which is a good thing. It's as you start getting below 100%.
Yeah, you just have to assume there will be another recession or another depression sometime in the future. So
And then
to build up.
Then the recommended borrow amount is about 900,000 more than what we would send the pension system. Why is that?
Oh, well, we're going to make some timing adjustments on the liability, and we've incorporated some costs in there. Rest that will have to, cost of the transaction of doing the bond issue.
So there's significant costs there up front, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I address that? Okay. When I talked about the unfunded liabilities, and you compare the assets to the liabilities. So one of the things, the actuaries calculate two different numbers for asset return. What they'll do is if there's a gain or a loss, they spread that out over 7 years, and that's to reduce volatility of contribution rates. So when you look at the UAAL, they've only recognized 1/7 each year of gains or losses. So there's an unrecognized loss that is still coming into play. If we took it at market value today, there would be a jump up in contribution rates. So there's a difference between the actuarial assets and market value. So that additional amount is saying, just because we haven't recognized those losses, we know they're there. And so that's one, if you went to 100% today and recognized part of that loss next year, you would drop below 100%. So doing it this way, you've already accounted for all of those.
And so the additional 900,000, there's going to be costs, and then does the county retain some of that money?
Well, that difference is, I think there's
Not
some
retained.
present value adjustments to the numbers that we just made on here a little bit, and then the costs that we would size up the deal on.
So yes, it remains with the county, but not in the county's control.
remains with-
It goes to the county's account.
Everything
That's what
goes
you
to,
mean.
yeah, everything goes to
But it's
PSPRS
kept by the
except
state.
for the costs, at which time would be paid upon the closing of the transaction.
Yeah, and so what are those costs?
Those are gonna be a function, we're still putting those together, you know, $500,000 or $600,000 roughly.
my guess.
Just due to the size of the transaction and the complexity of it. And I'm working with, Mr. Villegas had asked us that, we're working on that with staff, and we'll bring that back to you.
Right.
Okay.
But I do like that idea, if you get overfunded and you have a contingency reserve fund, the nice thing about the contingency reserve funds, you could tweak it and adjust it and release some of that cash back to the general fund if things are going your way. So that may be something that I hadn't really thought of. I thought that was a good idea, Mr. Reyes. Okay. Let's see. Any questions so far?
Never hear the end.
They'll never hear the end of that.
Sorry.
Say every chance I'll get.
Okay, sorry. I did think it was a.
Continue. It's just a snide comment on the
Board
side
has
here,
great
yeah.
questions, and I think you should be
Yeah,
complimented
well,
for that.
not better than my ideas, but it's okay.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Okay, how are we doing so far? I'm almost done.
Continue. You went past your 15 minutes about 20 minutes ago.
So,
Okay.
this is a financing calendar, and if you all were interested in proceeding, call it expeditiously. And we can go on whatever calendar you all prefer. This is a calendar that has us coming back on November 16th, I think it is, 11/3/91 hearing. I think that's on the agenda I saw. And then with the public hearing, we've been through this together before on our infrastructure transactions. We would then have to wait 2 weeks, and then we would come back to the board on December 7th for approval of the bond resolution while we are parallel tracking the credit rating process, the bond information material, all the things that we work on that you would approve on the 16th. And we would, on a parallel track, be in a position to go ahead and get a transaction done by the end of the year if that was the desire of the county. Yes.
And when on that calendar would you lock in the rate?
There you go. That was my question.
Good question.
Yeah.
Complimenting,
When do you lock it in and make sure it doesn't go up or down?
this is our Board of Supervisor meeting date.
That is the only time it'll
So
be
this
locked
says
in,
that we're selling bonds the next week. See where that says underwriting?
Yep.
And we're parallel tracking all the incredible amount of work that goes on behind the scenes. We're talking to investors all around the country about Yuma County, why are they doing this, the credit quality of our county, a lot of things that Omar and I and Claude do behind the scene, and we'll be selling here and having it closed accordingly.
So you don't lock in any rate?
We'll lock in that week.
Yeah.
Fixed rate.
Until you
lock
actually
in.
buy.
Let me ask you another question. This seems to be a pretty ambitious schedule. Does it require that we declare an emergency?
Oh, yes.
Because normally that takes more
Yes.
time.
Yeah, that, good point on that. We've had that come up before. You're exactly right. Generally speaking, as you recall in our last bond deal, Pinal County just approved their resolution on Friday. And that was adopted with an emergency that allows us to move forward expeditiously because of the changing,
Yeah, we can
quickly changing. But yeah, it would require, otherwise we'll have to go in January or first quarter.
Would that require for us to, 4 of us to vote in favor of an emergency clause? That would be a legal question.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that's usually what we do when we're issuing bonds. That's when we are ready to work out the resolution. Part of the resolution is preparing.
Just want to make sure everybody understands that if we're going to put this on a fast track, it's going to require not just a majority of the board, it's going to require 4 out of 5 members to say yes, because emergency clauses normally take a supermajority to get done.
And that takes place November 1?
No, November
7th.
We wouldn't do the emergency?
Oh, wouldn't do the emergency until December 7th?
Yes.
Gotcha.
That's when legal puts, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that's when legal puts together all the paperwork, the resolution,
Yes,
all the notices. have to
it
be
does say
sent out.
that. It says assumes emergency class adoption. That for December 1st. It does say that on the schedule.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Sure. About this?
Mr. Chair, yeah. I have a question about, we have an election on November 3rd. Now, does that,
impact anything?
yeah, how's that going to impact the interest rate?
No.
It could.
It could.
Well, that's just a.
Oh, you're
that's
talking about
part of the
I'm
process.
sorry, you're talking about the
You're talking
presidential
about
election.
national situation.
I want a 2 or 3% interest rate.
No, it's fair. That's another question. we get from clients, we've had some clients ask us in that regard, can we proceed prior to the election? In fact, Gila County asked us that, and Pinal County asked us that. So we backed into a rather expeditious calendar to accommodate their requests. So the supply around the country is about 18 billion. So a lot of issuers around the country are going into the bond market before the election based on what they believe will happen. And so we're being accommodated of that and go out and sell bonds accordingly.
Yeah, but I don't think our process allows us that expediency. I think we're starting late, and I don't think we have enough time, unless you had it like 2 weeks. I mean, you can't do it in 2 weeks. So it's a moot point.
Okay.
To deal with whatever the outcome is.
Okay.
All of us, everywhere. The question here is basically, not even a question. I'm not sure that, are you asking us to take any action today, or is this just a presentation?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Oh, guidance is guidance, but action?
Yes, if this is an option that the board would like to proceed with, then we would like to set up the public hearing by the.
All right, let me ask you then, what's our, what's it called? Our availability of bond authority? Are we running into any limitations at all?
The type of issuance that we're pursuing this time is a revenue bond, so they're gonna be our pledged revenues. It's based on our.
I know what they are. I'm asking, do we have any? We do?
For
And this is not gonna impact any of our other infrastructure projects?
Of course, we're gonna issue debt, $33 million. That is gonna have an impact, and whatever else we would like to do.
Whatever else we want to do.
Yes. So do you have our coverage?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
You know, it's fine, it's fine. Just answer that question. We'll let him ask.
Okay, yeah, we have the ability to issue these bonds, and we have the ability to issue additional bonds in the future based on.
And that was the capacity that I was asking about. Right. You know, I get a little uncomfortable with people coming up to talk and not taking their, we seem to assume people who read lips or something isn't looking, right, I guess. So, it's just yeah, like that, yeah. I think we need to, we don't have a person that basically, hand signals everything we say. So we assume that everybody that's watching can actually, for some reason or other, hear that. But we have created sort of enough spacing so that we have people that come up to the podium be able to talk freely, so that people can read your lips, read my lips, right? So in essence, what we're talking about now is whether we have the capacity to issue these bonds and other bonds if we needed to. And the answer is yes, right? Yes. Okay, all right. I know they're revenue bonds, so we have to commit future revenues to pay them off. But you also want to make the point that if you don't, you're going to still be paying out of the general fund whatever liabilities we have. So it's just a matter of where the money comes from. And that's a job we need to do in convincing the voters that this is the right decision. And I think that's the political side of things. Anyway, Supervisor McLeod.
So, a couple of things I just wanted to point out. If we proceeded with this, by 2026, the amortization we'd have to be paying exceeds the highest cost that this bond repayment would ever get to. 2026 will come around pretty quick. And it actually starts out at about the same. So the impact to our budget very quickly becomes a positive one by 2026. And so I find that to be desirable. And then the second question is, we would start out with $2 million increase. Yeah, 1 million next year and 2 million, just over 2 million in 22, 23. I assume you would not bring this to us if you were not confident that the general fund would be able to sustain this cost.
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor McLeod, that is correct. We have numbers of hours talking to Stiefel, the underwriter, and looking at our numbers, how the revenues are coming in, our strong fund balance. As a matter of fact, this is one of the reasons why we're going with this option, because of our great credit rating and our great fund balance that we have. So it's an option the staff is recommending.
Okay.
All right. Okay,
One more
so,
question.
yeah, go ahead. One last question, Supervisor.
Any penalty for early payoff? Could we pay it off early, or would we have to go the whole amortization?
10 years?
10 years?
Generally, 10 years is what our.
Okay. Okay, and so we would be paying on it for 10 years minimum?
At least.
Yeah, it's called a callable option on 10 years. Then we can pay the entire thing if we have the funds, if we like.
At that time. Okay.
Right. Okay, I think we heard, it's a very good presentation, both of you, and you did it in record time. I don't think so, but anyway. You know, just to say that, because you did say it was a good idea, somewhere in there, so. Anyway, we've heard the presentation. Do we want to, I mean, what's the feeling of the board? I think we don't need to vote, and whether I think we want to proceed as a vote, but I think the direction should be, we all think it's a good idea, and we think you should proceed. Is that correct? Do we all?
I do.
Okay, well then, I think you get it.
Mr. Chairman, if
so,
you're going to give
you know.
direction, you should take a vote.
Okay, well, all right then. We'll take a vote. The motion should read that we go ahead and provide guidance and direction to the staff and the, to deal with the pension plan deficit. Then the motion should say that we consider it appropriate to issue bonds and schedule a public hearing to receive comments on authorizing the county to secure obligations by November 16, and to approve the necessary budget adjustments to complete the transaction. That was pretty well in there. So that's it. That's going to be the motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a motion and second to do what was requested from our agenda item?
No, Darren.
So, any more discussion on this? If not, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? There you have it. You have the
Thank you.
signature. All right. Thank you very much. And we're going to move on to the next item, which will only take like another 30 minutes. And it's the presentation about the
Thank you, gentlemen.
Smucker Park construction contract with DPA, which should be something to behold for you, Mr. McLeod, that you came in and leave, and still haven't gotten the Smucker Park bill.
Yep, I'm well aware of that, Mr. Chairman. I was thinking about that just this morning.
All right, so, go ahead.
Reyes and supervisors, Chris Young from the engineering department, along with Kevin Roberts from Dibble Engineering, the design consultant. I do have a presentation for you, but just to give you a heads up, a lot of this is for, I put this for public that are not familiar with the project so much. I can go through the history if you want me to, but I think we're better off not to. So, again, for folks that aren't familiar with the project timeline.
40 years.
Well, the good news, I think hopefully we're coming to the end of the process where we can actually start the project, hopefully.
So you say.
We hope. So just to point out, this is the drainage area that we're talking about, and you can see Smucker Park in the foreground here. Stakeholders, everybody knows the stakeholders, City of Yuma, flood control, ADWR, and so on, Yuma County Water Users Association. This is the original design concept, and we found out during the design process over the years that the hospital and the high school both needed to expand, and so that changed the configuration of our project slightly.
Yeah.
A lot.
A lot.
So this is the current configuration to give you a quick view of it. Why the project is needed. Again, I know you guys are familiar with the project, but it's right size for the detention basin, the drainage area that we talked about. It also meets ADWR jurisdictional requirements, which we'll talk a little bit more about as we move forward, and enhances and enables future opportunities for development. Major project elements, of course, we have the embankment in green. We have the major sewer relocation, 36-inch sewer main. We have the emergency spillway, which is one of the requirements that ADWR put forth.
And that'll spill into where?
Into the parking lot. There's once it reaches a certain height, the ADWR requires that there's a 5-foot
Spillway.
freeboard or clearance at the embankment. When it reaches that threshold, it'll spill over into the parking lot. The orange area is the spillway that you see.
Copa High School parking lot.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the high school parking lot.
And then the lower fields, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is where the water currently goes.
Yes.
I don't know if the fact that we've been trying to put it together for so many years means it's really not that needed, or if it's just been lucky not to have needed it.
Well, it's needed, you know, and I can talk about that a little bit. When you look at the design criteria, the 100-year storm and the probable maximum flooding and all, it is needed. This is just to illustrate where the Supervisor McLeod was asking me. It goes into the high school parking lot. There's a flood wall, 30-inch flood wall that takes it down into the fields to the south.
It's like a channel.
Major components, again, the drainage inlets, massive drainage culvert that drains into the basin. And that'll service the areas, Holly Street, Westridge, all those areas that we talked about. Basin outlet, as we coordinate with Yuma County Water Users Association, it'll go into the canal once they're agreeable to let us drain into the canal when we have water that's accumulated in the extension basin. We talked a little bit about ADWR jurisdiction, and I'm leading to a point just to describe maybe why DPE is asking to be released from the contract. ADWR jurisdictional issues are design thresholds. Well, I'll show you a slide in just a second. Seismic concerns and work plan is required for the work. Jurisdictional issues, anything over 25 feet in height, or anything we're retaining more than 50 acre feet. We're just under the height threshold, but we are very well within the retention area or detention area. We're triple over the acre feet. So that brings it into ADWR's jurisdiction. Also, there's seismic concerns. I was a little surprised about the historic seismic issues with Yuma, but it is, in the past, has been a fairly active seismic zone. So it's one of the things that ADWR considers in their design review. Okay, that brings us to DPE's request to be released from the contract. In talking with DPE, they really struggled over a period of time to get the work plan approved by ADWR. And basically that keys on the embankment design and construction. It's a very, very elaborate work plan that's required. We're talking 180 pages, 200 pages of work.
It's a dam.
It's a dam.
Dam, jurisdictional dam.
An earth dam.
Yeah.
Rigorous construction compaction specs. DPE felt that they couldn't meet those specifications, even after several attempts of a test run of the embankment. And also, they were concerned about the financial risk, the liability if, for some reason, they weren't able to complete the project successfully. So action items, we would like, well, let me back up. Action items number 1 would be to have the board approve that we can release DPE from the contract.
Before we go there, how far have they gotten into the contract?
The only thing that they've invested into the project is reviewing the plans, technical specs, and trying to develop the work plan itself. No construction has taken place.
So from July that we gave them the bid to now, a year later, they are now realizing they may not be able to do it.
Well,
ADQ, go ahead.
right. It's a kind of it's a long story.
Everything.
There was a threshold time period that was originally given to DPE to develop the work plan, and in order to get a notice to proceed with construction, they had to have an approved work plan. So there was, I think, 2 or 3 iterations of that went forward to the consultant, eventually went forth to ADWR. We actually worked through design change that DPE requested that took a little bit of time to do it. Anything you want to change with ADWR is not an overnight kind of a thing.
Oh, maybe.
So all this took a painful amount of time. so we are where we are today.
Well, yeah, we started in 1980, so certainly hasn't been.
So the second and third action items, if you will, staff is recommending that we rebid the project. We want to make a couple of minor tweaks to the specifications to clean up some items that we saw in there. Also, we suspect, as I mentioned in the staff report, DPE's bid for the project was around $10.4 million. In talking with the consultant and several potential bidders, our feeling is it's going to be over the 10.4 and substantially over the 10.4. So we would like to, or staff would recommend that we utilize emergency contingency funding in the flood control budget.
Don't you think, I mean, that bringing this up right now just sort of lets them know, we're going to be looking at a higher price? I mean, I know what you're saying, and you're saying that you need to get ready, but this seems to me, okay, maybe the question should be, where are the $3.6 million? Inside the project, or is it going to have to be, is it going to have to come from someplace else?
It's within the flood control budget.
It's within the flood control
emergency
budget.
and contingency funding. We have 3.6 million in those.
Oh.
And I thought, I agonized about that, Chairman Reyes, as well. Are we tipping our hand? And hopefully we can do some direct solicitation, if you will, and I've already reached out to a couple of potential contractors and talked to them. Folks that have experience with this kind of project, that have done projects with flood control districts in Maricopa, and large-size earth-moving projects, golf courses and things like that, landfill expansions and different projects that hopefully folks will realize this is a very specialized project, and it's an intense amount of coordination, not only with consultant and our staff, but with ADWR.
Okay. All right, well, you addressed the fact that, again, I just felt uncomfortable tipping our hand, as you stated. I mean, in saying that
Can't we just do that at the time the contract is
Yes,
bid?
we can.
Yes, we
I would say that not be part of our action today.
And I agree. I mean, this doesn't have to be an action item, but I'm more.
Hopefully these people aren't looking at. I mean, I think that you telling us, look, you expect it to come in a little higher is something that we appreciate. Just not telling them, which is they're looking at, they will know. If anybody interested on a $10 million project or $14 million project is going to be interested in finding out the history behind it.
Absolutely. And I've had several phone calls and lengthy conversations with contractors. And I would say, they do this on a day in and day out basis. They know that the 10.4 that DPE had on the table was
a little lower there.
So I don't think we're tipping our hand as much as it seems like we are, but I do understand and appreciate your point.
All right. You get to vote on this one again.
Yeah.
Okay, the first part of this was to release DPE, and I think it doesn't do anybody any good to force someone to do a contract that he basically is already telling you he can't do, and it's unfortunate, but not necessarily unusual. It happens, and I think it's better if you deal with it up front. Don't get into it too deep, and then you have a situation where a second contractor to come in and fix it will cost a hell of a lot more. And so in some ways, although it took a long time for him or whomever to come to terms with DPE, to come to terms with the fact that they underbid it, it's smart for them and in some ways for us to simply admit that didn't work and go back and redo it.
Chairman Reyes and board members, just to let you know, we do have that fail-safe built into the specifications. You do have to have a work plan approved by ADWR before you get the notice to proceed. So just as you smartly brought up, we don't get into that situation where we have a little bit of the construction done and we have to award it to a different contractor.
Yeah, normally that's worse.
It's a mess.
I mean, it's a mess. They have to redo everything and charge you for it. Okay, so I think the first one is kind of simple. Yes?
Yeah, my motion would be that we release DPE construction from the contract and basin project number 3.9703 and move forward with a new bidding process for this project.
All right, a second for that?
Second?
The motion and second, any more discussion on the item? Thank you for the presentation, that was pretty
Thank you very
simple.
much.
All those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. I'm sure that DPE is breathing a lot better today after this. The next item in the agenda, thank you very much. The next item in the agenda is discussion regarding legislative issues. This is where,
No, you're missing.
what, are we missing one?
Another motion to go out to bid.
Oh, the bid? Oh, shoot, wow, this was engineering. I thought this was public works. Discussion on possible correction of budgeting options recommended by the infrastructure management system for a payment management strategy. Sorry, we used up all the money on the past one, on the past two. So you can't get any money, we used it up.
Build the basin.
All right.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Josh Scott, Public Works Director. I was in front of you in late July with a presentation on how and why we did payment condition inspections. And also as part of that, the need to adopt a industry recognized standard for those inspections. But as part of the next steps I presented to you back in July was to come back and have Infrastructure Management Services, IMS, present their findings from a comprehensive pavement condition survey they did for us. You may have seen pictures of their, I think it was called the laser road tester van in the Yuma Sun or on the Channel 77. But they drove more than 600 centerline miles of our roads, collecting a whole bunch of different data on the condition of our pavements. And then they put together some recommendations on pavement preservation and maintenance, and some budget models that we'll be able to use to better forecast our needs and plan our work. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim with IMS, and he can go through the results of that survey.
This is not an enviable situation to be in, huh? You're between us and lunch.
Are you getting hangry?
Yeah.
Am I driving this show on the PowerPoint?
Yeah, you can. Or we can have her speed it up, and you just have to explain.
To the right is forward? Perfect, thank you. I'll go ahead and start with the slide presentation. The starting point is the scale of investment, basically some quick statistics about Yuma County, specifically 596 centerline miles of road maintained by the county, and that equates to roughly 10.8 million square yards of pavement. That pavement cost alone is $584,000 per mile, or $348 million in total value, and that's the largest visible asset that the county maintains. That excludes things like improvements, right-of-way assets, the value of the land itself, bridges, sidewalks, etc. And then a quick early look at the pavement condition index, PCI, not to be confused with PBI, I think that was mentioned earlier. But pavement condition index is 61, which is considered good. And equally important and probably less discussed is the backlog. And backlog is defined as a pavement condition index of 40 or below, no longer eligible for an overlay and requires either a partial or full reconstruct. As you can imagine, very expensive, so we want to make sure that that number is also in check. Our recommended target there is at 15% or below. Why do pavement management? The red curved line is essentially a pavement's deterioration over its life, starting off as excellent, and then several decades later, it is all but gravel. The important point here is that 40% of the pavement's new life deteriorates only 15%, but the next 15% of its pavement life deteriorates at 40%. So the idea is to get in early and often with less expensive treatments. There's a target zone for doing lightweight rehab strategies. That 8-to-1 ratio is real, so being cognizant of where you are in terms of the pavement condition index is important to take care of those good roads and maintaining those in just that, a good condition. The concept of pavement management starts off in a cycle in terms of starting with county objectives, benchmarks, whether it's determining a PCI level of service that you want for your citizens. From there, doing what IMS does, which is understanding the condition. Taking our LCMS2, the laser crack measurement system, state-of-the-art technology that understands what the distresses are in order to come up with accurate pavement condition for every segment throughout the network. And from there, setting priorities, doing an analysis, and coming up with reporting so that you know what to expect over a course of 5 years in terms of at your current funding, where will you be, and at other funding levels, where will you be in that scenario as well. So overall, balanced approach to pavement management. This is that LCMS2 laser road surface tester van that did drive all the roads. We do a continuous survey of the 596 centerline miles. We did some two-pass testing in both directions on some of the major roads, and it's picking up surface distresses. These are a partial list, but an important list of some of the indexes that are picked up: roughness, alligator cracking, patching, potholes, bleeding, things like that. And it goes through that data, that raw data, it goes through a rigorous QA, QC program. Spend weeks on doing a review of the images and the actual data in order to come up with that PCI score that we've been talking about. From there, and I jumped one, I'll back up. We then grouped the results into 5 categories or buckets, starting off with a group of PCI between 0 and 25 that are considered unacceptable. This happens to be a road that has a PCI of 23. I think you can see that, but there's quite a bit of alligator cracking throughout the road, driving the pavement condition index down quite a bit, and no longer really eligible for that overlay, but probably a reconstruct is required here. The next bucket up, needs improvement. That's a PCI between 25 and 40, and makes up the rest of those in that backlog category. This particular road has a PCI of 36, quite a bit of longitudinal transverse cracking, some distortions as well, but an example of one of the roads in your network that had a PCI of 36. Yeah. The next is the lowest acceptable group. That particular PCI is a 49, and don't let the extensive seal cracking throw you. That's actually a good thing. Keeps water from intruding and making the roads worse quicker, so that's a good thing. Many agencies will then do some sort of a fog seal, kind of a paint over, so it is a little more pleasing. Citizens tend to comment on that, but the bottom line is this particular road had a PCI of 49. And then the next group is considered acceptable. This PCI is 73, as you see, moderate longitudinal cracking, but overall pleasing. The cracks are much less prevalent across the roadway network at this particular location. And then finally, an excellent road, PCI of 96. Nothing negative to say at all about this other than it's a beautiful road, and I'm sure those living on there appreciate it as well. So taking those 5 buckets and looking at the distresses along the x-axis are those same 5 groups from unacceptable to excellent, and the percent of the network area is shown as well. So unacceptable 0.4, needs improvement is at 7.8. The lowest acceptable group is at 52, so over half is in that group, and then acceptable right around 26%, and just under 14% for the excellent. A typical distribution will be skewed a little more to the right. Ideally, you'll have more roads in the acceptable, maybe more in the excellent as well, because keep in mind everything is deteriorating from right to left, and those in the middle are moving the fastest. We also look at 3 metrics of health when it comes to this distribution chart for Yuma County. The first is the nationwide average. We typically see the average PCI in the 60 to 65 range. You've achieved that with a 60.7. That's good news. The recommended excellent is below the recommended 15% at 13.8. That's a good indicator of being at or nearly fully funded, having enough money to do all the different rehab strategies, moving them from either unacceptable or even lowest acceptable or even acceptable, doing some lightweight treatment, and moving them into that excellent category. So fell just a little short there. And then the third category is that backlog. Currently at 8.2, as I mentioned, you want to be at or below 15%. So today, that number is in a good range. Apologize for the smiley face, but regardless. So what we do when we look at payment management methodology, and specifically for Yuma County, we know that the funding level is not zero, nor is it unlimited. We put a value, and you put a value on the roadway network because it's used by every citizen almost every day. And we also prioritize based on the functional class. Arterials given the highest priority, then collectors, and then lastly locals. We like to identify the annual budget to maintain the current PCI. What would it cost to keep that number over a course of 5 years, as well as keeping the current backlog. So maintaining that backlog is equally important. Some agencies are driven by backlog, some by PCI. In the case of Yuma County, it's a backlog-driven scenario. We also like to examine the effects of the current funding. Where will you be in 5 years at the current plane that you're on? And prevent deterioration in pavement quality, obviously, is a goal across the board. A few footnotes. The numbers that we are sharing don't include ADA compliance. That can be quite costly when you're having to do update ramps and other aspects that related to ADA, not typically in a budget when it comes to pavement management. Also, no cost of inflation is included, so these are based on present dollars. And lastly, pavement management is not priority-based. There is priority-based, it's not worst first. An example of worst first would be taking care of your worst 6 miles of road, making those brand new with a reconstruction project, but not having any money left over for the other 590 miles. Obviously not a winning scenario. IMS does a few different truthing, if you will, calculations prior to even doing the analysis with the data that's collected. We look at the, first off, the network average condition for asphalt roads, and on a lesser quantity, the concrete roads, and we apply the appropriate rehab strategy for each of those and extend it out over the course of the overall network and come up with an annual spend of estimate right around $5.8 million. A little more complicated calculation has to do with network efficiency and the life cycle cost. Long story short, similar approach, just using more detailed information, and I don't want to say coincidentally, but surprisingly very close to that same $5.8 million estimate. So the life cycle estimates show that in order to maintain the PCI without doing a full analysis, roughly $5.8 million is needed across the board annually. And this is a really important graph. What we have here is that blue diagonal line is several different budget runs running the analysis based on different funding levels. The x-axis is the funding on an annual basis in thousands, so we have anywhere from 0 to $13 million. And then on the y-axis, we have the post-rehab network condition average, so the PCI result based on a certain level of spending. I won't hit each of these, but I will touch on a few of the important ones. The first one, from left to right, that solid green line is the county's current budget of roughly $3.6 million. You can see at that particular funding over the course of 5 years, the PCI will go from roughly 61 down to 57.5. Also important in that same scenario, as noted here, the backlog jumps not only over 15, but over 20% to 22. So a fifth of the network, almost a fourth of the network, needs a reconstruct. And again, very expensive to do 1 mile, let alone a fourth or a fifth of the network. So very alarming number that needs to be pointed out. The solid red line is called the steady state PCI. That's maintaining the PCI over the course of 5 years. That would require right at $5.8 million. 5.83 is what it shows. And also worthy of note is that backlog number jumps over 15 as well to an 18%. So coming up on a fifth of the network would need a reconstruct in 5 years. And then we have the IMS recommended budget. The green dashed line, that is roughly a $9 million expense on an annual basis. That would result in a PCI of 66, very healthy number, and the backlog would climb, but only to 11%. So that is the reason for the recommended scenario. Next, I'd like to point out the equity removal chart here. pretty detailed. I'll try to boil it down to just a few of the columns. There's first off the do nothing. If the county decided to do no rehab strategies over the course of 5 years, the cost to replace that equity would be over $40 million, but the real dollars being pulled out of this asset is over $2.3 million each year because nothing was done. At the far end of this graph, we have that steady state PCI of 5.8 million. Because we're investing the right amount to maintain the PCI, we're not pulling anything out of the value of this asset, so the additional overage is zero. The middle one is close to the current county budget. It's 3.4 million, and as you can see, that scenario is pulling out just under $1 million a year, which, in truth, does need to be repaid at some point. With that, I will touch on the IMS recommendations for Yuma County. Maintaining the PCI above 60 with a backlog at or below 15%. The current county budget of 3.6 million will leave the PCI at 58, and backlog will jump quite a bit to 22%. The IMS recommended budget of $9 million, PCI of 66, backlog of 11%, and that steady state of 5.8 million keeps the PCI at 61, but increases the backlog to 18%. Other recommendations, including a full suite of rehab strategies. We've worked with public works staff to harness what they use and make sure that we're optimizing those approaches. Also, a steady and effective rehab maintenance annual basis, on an annual basis, saves money across the board. And sticking as close to possible to the recommended analysis optimizes what money is there. So deviations happen, whether that be needing to do roads that have grant funding or whatever the case may be. Maybe there's some projects that will cut through a road. You want to hold off doing any maintenance on those for the time being, but anything close to the optimization will help stretch the dollars as much as possible. And then lastly, doing a resurvey of the roads every few years to update the program, make sure that the PCI and the work that's being done is accurate is a recommendation as well. With that, any questions, even though I'm not supposed to ask if there's any questions?
Yeah, you're supposed to, after that, with that band there, that's not the one you use for us.
Not for yours, no. That one got retired shortly after that, jumping over a puddle. That didn't
No, this makes me, it's always when you order a survey or when you conduct a survey, you almost never get a result that you got, you don't have any problems. It's always, normally, it comes back this way. I mean, if we do a market survey for salaries, it almost never comes back that you're paying too much. Right. So doing a survey of streets, it sort of sets us up for a situation like this where you set aside $3-point-some million, but you need 9. We've always known that. I think most of us that have been sitting here for years realize that the more you delay maintenance or repairs, the more likely that you're going to pay more when you have to replace. That's whether it's the air conditioner in your house or whether it's the street or a road in Yuma County. It's just making that tough decision about setting aside the funds to fix it or at least to avoid the major repair that I think always comes to roost when we have a survey like this. I don't know if the comment makes me feel any better, but I guess I'll make it. I mean, I wish it's like having your home budget and knowing that every kid wants the new computer and the new iPad, whatever, and then having to spread the money around. We just had a presentation earlier about the pension plan, and this is about streets, and then we have infrastructure. We were trying to find a board meeting place. We've been doing that for 4 years. We had a project that you just saw from 1980. That Smucker Park project was a 1980s project that we've been carrying for 30, and it's not getting any cheaper. I remember when it was $7 million. It is now reaching the range of 13, 14. So to me, that's not a lesson that I'm learning anew. It is just something that never fails to shock me anyway when I realize that we should stop doing surveys. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you very much for your presentation. Scott, you want to come up and maybe there'll be some comments about it? I think I've made my point. Any comments? You're not asking us today to increase the budget, right?
No,
You're,
sir.
you're just simply letting us know what the results of the survey are, and to keep in mind that to really upgrade the county road structure, infrastructure, it's going to take us investing more money than we originally thought, or at this particular time that we kind of knew we're going. You know, if you delay doing maintenance and upkeep for so many years, this is what you're going to end up with: a backup, a backlog of repairs and maintenance and replacements that it's obvious now. The new technology certainly makes it easier to not explain it, because now you have the figures than it would be to. All of us know that driving around county roads, it's kind of tough, especially
Well-
some of the outlying areas. But now we know that, it's going to take some investment to actually have an impact. Go ahead, Supervisor McLeod.
Well, you all get to convince the legislature they need to double the gas tax, which we've been trying to get them to do. If they were to double it, we'd have the money to do this. So do a full court press and get it done this time. I wasn't able to.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, this served a couple of purposes. And to your point about, we do these surveys already knowing we don't have the funds to lay out 9-point-something million dollars a year. This gives us the tools and the data to be better armed to have those discussions with the legislature about the impact that reduced HERF revenues is having on us. But this IMS survey also gives us the tools to see what we can get for the money we do have, how we can best optimize that. So we're not going to be able to fund that,
Optimal
recommended scenario of 9 million and change. But I think the steady state scenario he discussed, the 5.8 million, I think that's sustainable. It'll require us to make some changes within Public Works and Engineering and how we allocate our budgets, but I think that's achievable.
Without additional funds? That's achievable without adding more funds?
I believe so, with the current HERF revenues.
Oh, okay.
I'm not saying it won't hurt and we won't have to do things in
Prioritize.
other areas to make up for that, but I think it's more sustainable than almost $10 million a year on this. Now, it doesn't get us a PCI of a 65 or a 67, but it gets us in that 60 range to where, we're on par with the national average and our roads are.
No, and it gives us, again, arguments when we go up there, because, I'm sure that the legislature or any of the funding sources that we go to are used to people complaining about, the lack of funds to build the roads. And, you always end up with this philosophical thing against taxes, any kind of taxes. But, if you show, well, not this van itself, we're going to try not to use this one, but maybe the other one, we have this, look like an earthquake happened to that road. Maybe, the pictures do tell a story. And essentially, we all know that in Yuma County, it only takes us getting off the main road to get into some of the side roads, and you're going to get a true picture of what the situation is. It is so unfortunate that a lot of these situations that we're dealing with happen to be things that we sort of accepted, right? I mean, when we accept a subdivision, we're accepting upkeep and maintenance. We're inheriting a good road. But then again, we're also inheriting the maintenance. It's like I equate it to when the cell companies, basically give you a new phone, but what they want is you to have a 2-year contract with them. I mean, it's just, they'll give you the phone. It's just, but they want you to pay it in little pieces as you go along. Anyway,
What concerns me looking at it is just the lowest acceptable. It's over 50%. We're right there where it could very easily go to the needs improvement very quickly. It could go either way. Is it just recently made the lowest acceptable, or is it at the bottom end of its life fixing to go to needs improvement or unacceptable? So,
Mr. Chairman and Supervisor Simmons, I don't recall what the percentage is that's getting ready to roll into that next lowest category. I can pull that together, but that's where we need to focus our efforts, is on from there to the right side of that graph that Jim showed you. So
that's my big
start to
concern.
deteriorate further and fall into that category. That's where it's going to cost us 8 or more times as much to rehab or reconstruct those roads to some acceptable standard.
Right, okay. The picture of the nationwide average and the backlog and the recommended and the excellent, I mean, it tells a picture. It just tells a picture of a tipping point to me. I mean, it tells a picture of the difference between having to replace something and having to maintain something and the cost involved in it. So if nothing else, we're now getting a clearer picture of where we're at in terms of the condition of the roads in all Yuma County. And other than having the city of Yuma annex more land and, more areas, we're gonna be dealing with this a lot, because if you have an unincorporated area like the foothills, or unincorporated areas like the Orange Grove area, or the areas out in the county, I mean, it's obvious that that's not a solution for us. A solution for us is to start investing more and making sure those conditions don't get into a replacement side, because once we get into the replacement side, we're gonna be putting a lot of money into solving 4.4% of the problem, as opposed to solving, something much, much easier, much less
That's
costly.
that backlog Jim was
That's the
talking about.
backlog,
Once
Jim.
you get over that 20% mark, it's a snowball effect and
Right. So does this mean to me, Scott, it means to me that from this point on, we now have identified those streets that are at that particular point. So we need to sort of focus that when you come forward with a plan for next year, you'll be able to point to some of these areas that, hey, look, we can't delay this anymore. We have to put it in this area, we have to bring this up. So it gives you the tools to present the plan you can defend, or for the funding that you need, not want, but need. Okay?
Absolutely, that's
All
what
right.
this does. And then one other thing real quick, that when I was here back in July, I mentioned we're operating under a board-adopted resolution from 2003 in regards to our payment management program. Lots changed since then.
What?
We've gone through a recession and HERF revenues, HERF sweeps, et cetera. So as part
Only
of
20
this,
years old, almost.
now that we have this information and data, I'm going to
Can't
come
afford
back to you with a proposed resolution to supersede that 2003 one, something that's more realistic and sustainable, given what we know today.
All right, okay, this is the problem with information. You now have to use it to make decisions. Supervisor?
I just want to make a comment. You mentioned the HERF revenues, and that I know that you can do something with that money that we get. And I think I've talked to Susan about it, or I've asked this question about how much of that HERF money is going just to employees, and employees that are not directly to, I would say they probably are some kind directed to roads, but I would like to see a comparison of how much money we get and how much of that money is going directly to employees, and which employees are going salaries. And don't give me that 1.05 money wise. Give me salaries. The budget. What amount of money is going from HERF to each employee that's getting paid by the HERF fund? Because I think it can be doable, like you said. There's going to be some changes, but we have to. I think we just have to. It's kind of, the roads are kind of like that project we just saw. We heard about it, since 1980. Thanks to Lynn and Simmons that we started. I'm just throwing it.
Stop this. You got to move on.
But
only have 2 seconds more.
It's something that that I'm glad that we're starting to do it, and I just think if we're not going to do it in 4 years, 3 years. It's going to take a while, but it can be done.
Yeah. Thanks to all the tools that we're now providing. So
And it's Darren back here behind you.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to defend it. I'm just kidding. Okay, Scott, thank you. I don't think you don't have a decision, do you? Josh? Why do I keep calling you David now?
I was going to say, you finally stopped calling me.
You're looking at his last name.
I'm not looking at him. I'm looking at him, and he looks to me like a Scott or something.
He is a Scott. It's his
Thanks,
last
Josh.
name, yeah.
Well, he has like a first name and a second name that could be either.
I know this.
Paul, are you
Josh
sure you
Scott,
want to come
Scott
up here?
Josh, what is it? Anyway, you didn't need a motion from us, right? This was the presentation. All right, thank you very much. The next item in the agenda, well, you know what? I have this open, open
Thank you.
call to the public item here, and I don't know if Mrs. Jennifer Minduck is here or not, but I don't want it to wait that much longer. Oh, there you are. I'm sorry, I missed you. I guess we got the Windex box in there. Do you want to come and make your statement, ma'am? Otherwise, you may maybe hear longer than you need to be. No. Come up and say your piece.
Okay, so Chairman Reyes and members of the board, thank you for fitting me in. Some of you know me already. I've become kind of a gadfly for the election system here. And to tell you that I'm worried about it was almost not true. By the last two meetings, I felt just so confident that the things I was thinking could go wrong had been resolved. And I sat down at my computer this morning with my pajamas still on, my cup of coffee, and I was going to watch to hear the latest on the elections. And this fact hit me between the eyes. So next thing you know, I'm hopping out of my jammies and coming here. And I know that you can't discuss this, and it could be a misinterpretation. There's not a lot of literature when people speak, and I can't pore over the data. But what does concern me, and I am delighted with how well things are going. Very delighted. This is extremely challenging. So what's happened so far is very encouraging. It was mentioned that about 20,000 mail-in ballots have arrived, and 7,000 have been processed. Okay, so I did a little bit of math, and I know that there's a problem. They extended registration, so they were split. But if you put it up from 7 to 10,000 even, at that rate, from what I understand about the 2018 elections, where there was high interest, just like this time around, there were like 65 to 69, 2/3 of our voters were mail-in. So at that rate, I'm just going to go with 10 and look optimistic, we won't even be halfway through on election day. So I can't believe that something that stark is going unnoticed. It must be me and my math, but I would totally appreciate some of you going over there and checking on that and making sure is not the case. This isn't just for the people that have their ballots counted. It's also for the people that have a chance to come in and fix their signature. So it's actually going to be backing up more so. And what I've noticed in my readings and trying to figure out what's going on is that, excuse me, this again you'd have to check, but I think by the 20th of October, our election group has to let the state know who we've hired. That's the deadline, and that could be wrong, but that means that if any of you are going to look into this, it's kind of a quick deadline.
Okay.
The recorder mentioned 15 people had been hired.
16, actually.
Does that include poll workers and curing people?
No, that's inside. The poll workers are a lot more than that.
Oh, okay. So 15, consider...
16.
16, 16, okay. Consider maybe hiring more when you look at those statistics if they bear out. And I hear, again, you know the numbers more than I do. I hear between 300,000 and 400,000 has come in because of COVID in this election.
Oh,
to the elections, not to you guys.
Oh, God.
The county has gotten money too, but my thought is they talked about getting an elections card, which sounds really good to me, but the top priority is that everybody that wants to vote votes. That comes from our identity and our sense of community, that we all matter in Yuma. So to divert some of that money, and we have, could be wrong, 24 hours, maybe, to get more people on with that process would be helpful for that, very helpful.
Right. Okay, we'll pass that information along. I think that what we got is a very receptive recorder and elections director. So we'll pass that concern on. And I didn't hear it the way you heard it. I actually heard basically that they were ready and that because I think Supervisor Pancrasi asked that question, do you need more people? And, that was an easy one to answer. And normally, if a person feels overwhelmed, and I think she's capable, I'm talking about Mrs. Poquet, she would have said yes, or, she would have said that. She said they think they're ready. And we have to assume that they think they're ready and make sure they are. And that's the next step.
And all respect, I know I'm not supposed to discuss, but I think they thought they were ready in 2012 and 2016. And a lot of people got thrown under the rug and disenfranchised. So
Well, I think
we
they're more ready.
lost a major person, a highly qualified elections person. The right arm, from my understanding of the structure, is gone. And there's a huge load on that person.
Yeah.
So I know that person is trying very hard and very intelligent, and she thinks she's ready. But I view this for that whole department as things being thrown at them from all angles.
Mhm.
And it would help if people were willing to do that, and you said you are so great. And I appreciate, again, you're making time for this.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
and we will make sure that she gets that message and that the administrator, Susan, who is our contact person in that regards, pass that on and keeps a close eye on whether, she's gonna need additional assistance or not. And if she sees it, she'll be able to force that. Right? Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, for doing that, and thank you for hearing me again.
Jennifer, welcome. All right, thank you. And we're gonna leave that open. We're not gonna close it until the end. And now we have, I think, discussion regarding legislative issues. And that would be, the first one would be county administration, discussion and possible action regarding the following legislative items: a report to the Board of Supervisors regarding proposed bills in the state legislature, and that will have an impact in Yuma County, and an update regarding strategies relating to federal legislative priorities. Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Melcher, Director of Economic Development and Intergovernmental Affairs. Mr. Chairman, starting with the state legislative update, there don't appear to be any special sessions on the horizon. I still think that we're in a holding pattern until after the November 3rd election. The only pending matter that we really have at the federal level is something that's kind of an arbitrary deadline. It sounds as though tomorrow is the deadline when the House and the White House will either come to agreement on some type of stimulus package, or that'll be the end of all the discussions. I know that's kind of an arbitrary decision. It's been stated several times over the last month or so, but I think we'll figure that out and see if there's any stimulus bill that gets presented to the president for signature before the November 3rd election. Mr. Chair, I just had one quick reminder that the CSA legislative summit is this week. There are a number of proposals that were repeats from last year, of course, since we had a truncated election cycle and we went through and just had the skinny budget, kind of ending most of the life of most of the bills that were proposed. There were some proposals I just wanted to bring to your attention, so if you wanted to look through there and review them prior to, that they weren't repeats. And that was, the first one was about write-in candidacy and making sure that the date of residency for write-ins matched the date of residency for those who were running through the typical, getting your signatures, running through the typical primary election cycle. There's a car allowance discussion for the Board of Supervisors, a military military leave pay provision that's being proposed. Number 10, I thought, was probably the most substantive change and proposal that was included in the packet. That's the court system financial responsibility and having the discussion about the state actually taking over the entire court system since it runs through the Arizona Office of the Courts. There's an item that might be near and dear to several of your hearts. That was the ag composting, and the question coming up about methane gas production from ag composting. Can that be regulated? How can it be regulated in terms of ag composting if it's actually an exempt activity? And then number 13 was the elected improvement district boards. There was a proposal that allows the recreation improvement districts to be elected as a board instead of just having the Board of Supervisors sit as that board. So, Mr. Chairman, typically we haven't gone over those. What we've been doing at the CSA proposals is looking, getting all the comments, bring those back for further action, ratification of that by the Yuma County Board of Supervisors. So I'd be happy to entertain any general questions if the board might have them.
I don't know if it's a general question, but I'd like to get an update on what the U of A is doing with the money we set aside for the lab, and how far along are they with the, sewer testing, whatever we call it. We call it, whatever.
Effluent testing.
Effluent testing.
Okay.
Just give us an update. I mean, they seem to, I haven't heard anything about it, so I just wonder where they are.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I had a question too, and it's reference to the CSA. It's maybe for Susan. We've got voting on Friday as far as what items. How can we talk amongst us? How are we going to you know, I
Decide
know
what
we
to
break
support.
out into the medium county caucus.
Is everybody gonna attend? Are you going?
Kind of was, yeah.
Yeah, you?
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is trying to do it at the same time you're doing something else, which is what the problem is when you're
Yeah.
not
But
physically
I'm just
there.
saying though, if we're wanting to talk about what our priorities are when it comes down, can we do that?
Can we
without-
post, Thursday, what is it, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday as possible communicate, so we can communicate?
Yes, we could actually set up an actual meeting, and you can participate by Zoom if you'd like to do that, so you can all talk together, we can actually post it as a meeting.
No, the idea is to have it open, to post Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday as possible discussion between us. So that's, so that I can call,
But I like that. After the Thursday session, set up a Zoom meeting. I like that, Susan.
Yeah, something where we can talk and figure out where our priorities are as a county.
Well, make sure we're all on the same.
Yeah, when it comes to
We won't
voting.
necessarily all be on the same page, in the
But,
session.
But I
yeah,
mean,
but,
discuss.
But each supervisor gets a vote.
Yeah, but I mean, we want to
so we'll
try to
discuss it.
put our votes together to.
Sure.
What we didn't do is on Thursday, there is on Thursday morning, there is a welcome discussion of coalition priorities, facilitated discussion of county legislative proposals. What we could do is post a meeting to start at 8 p.m. but not have 8 a.m. but not have an ending time. So after the discussion of the legislative proposals, you could stay on. We could set up a Zoom call, and you could all stay on and discuss the issues, or even come in person to the Board of Supervisors auditorium if you'd like to have a discussion on Thursday afternoon about what's been portrayed, so that you all can kind of feel like you're on the same page
Do you have any,
before the Friday vote.
what time is the Friday vote? Does anyone know?
At 8 a.m.
8 a.m.
There's a county caucuses meeting of medium counties, but that would be you and all the other people together with the medium county caucuses. There's not really an opportunity unless we set one up, as Darren mentioned, or Martine mentioned, to have a discussion of just you about what you'd like to do. So we could do that.
I'd like to set
So it
that
will be
up
Thursday
that
afternoon.
Thursday afternoon, maybe at 1,
I'm looking now.
because the schedule says 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. Unless you just
So
want
we're
to.
gonna need a lot of coordination, Paul, I mean, on this one, and that's why I, kind of wanted to see if there was a way to coordinate our positions before the actual meeting on
I
Friday.
want to make sure we're all on the same page as far as.
So
what
would
our
you like us to
priorities
set
are.
up a meeting on Thursday afternoon at 1 p.m. for the board to have a discussion?
I'm checking my calendar now, Susan.
And would you like to have it Zoom or in person?
We could do,
We can just do Zoom. You'd have to provide the public with a link though, right?
Yes, we would. So it would be in the posting. We could put it in the posting.
Either way is fine for me.
Mr. Chairman, you don't have to provide the public with a link, you just have to provide them access that they can hear the meeting. You can do that through your webpage or something.
Okay, so why don't we work in the logistics and let us know how we're going, the idea is to have an opportunity Thursday afternoon to talk about our possible position on Friday morning, and have one of us or all of us vote on Friday morning, and have the opportunity to know what we're gonna be dealing with the next day and what positions we would support. And that would require for us to listen Thursday.
Can we do it at 1:30?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
1:30?
I'm good either.
1:30?
So post it and we'll be back. I mean, we were supposed to be at this conference anyway. So, post a meeting for 1:30. By then, we'll have you all give us a summary in case we haven't been
We need-
in all the
We
time.
need to decide, are you going to have it by Zoom or are you going to have it here in person?
I'd rather have it in person.
I would too.
That way we can just simply have it in person and.
Everybody available for
I mean, it
that?
may take an hour or two.
Because we can't have a combo. It has to be one or the other.
Well, if
In
we're
this
gonna
room.
meet here, then let's just do 1 o'clock. Or 1:15.
That's fine. That's fine
Yeah,
with me.
just, if it's over at 12, just gotta give me drive time to get into town.
Does 1:15 work?
1:15 ought to work.
1:15, here at the board auditorium. Okay, thank you.
Right. Okay, so that more or less settles the discussion part, before we get ready.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Mr.
By then,
Chair.
I hope you have information about what's up and what we need to discuss and what we need to support internally. Okay, so you're in
Give
charge.
us a chance to all get together.
Right. Okay,
Figure out.
that takes care of that portion of, what did it? Does it really?
Yeah, we're done, except for this.
Okay, so the next is event calendar and of current events, and the board members and county administrator will report and may discuss events attended or to be attended on behalf of the county, may present a brief summary of current events, and may update the schedule for future board of supervisors meeting as appropriate. No legal action will be taken. Supervisor Pancrazy, tell us where you haven't been.
Well, the first thing I wanted to do is congratulate Garvey Blackwell for getting the Congressional Gold Medal of Honor for volunteering. She's only one of 469 14 to 18-year-olds in the country who got this Medal of Honor. I was able to attend her reception, and her presentation was given by Congressman Gosar. And I have to tell you, I met Garvey when I was a representative, and she was doing a free library out in the foothills for her area for Girl Scouts. And we've kept in contact all this time. And so she now has all the Medals of Honor for Girl Scouts and all the Medals of Honors for the Congressional Medals of Honor. And extremely, extremely proud of Garvey. And go from there. I attended the CNHA National Heritage Area Board meeting. I attended a PM10 meeting. I attended the Arizona Town Hall on Healthy Communities. I attended the YPIC meeting on workforce development. I was able to get in a portion of the Forefront ED Binational Virtual Panel of Leaders. I also got tested for COVID, and I'm negative, and I got a flu shot. And this afternoon is the fairground relocation meeting. So that's what I did.
Okay. Supervisor McLeod? Nothing?
Oh, let's see, after the last board meeting, I left here for Medford, Oregon, so.
So you started a fire out there?
I'll tell you what.
Ooh.
We drove through the burned areas.
It's tough.
The devastation.
Incredible.
When you, seeing it on TV doesn't do it justice. Hundreds of homes wiped out, businesses that were thriving a week before, and they were all set by some knucklehead setting fires on purpose. The devastation is just unbelievable, and it would skip areas. You'd be in a burned out area, and businesses on the left were gone. Businesses on the right were intact. Drive a little bit farther, then on the right side of the road, businesses and homes were burned out and not on the left. So the way it jumped around with the blowing embers was just incredible. And that was only that one small fire. So I can't imagine what some of these other areas are.
Colorado's going through that now?
Old Town's gone. It just, yeah, that was horrible. I'm glad I got an opportunity to see it so I could understand better. But I did manage, though, to attend a few meetings electronically. We had a CSA executive team meeting where we interviewed 3 candidates for the Public Safety Personnel Retirement System Board. The counties get 1 representative on that board, so the current person has put in to remain, and then there were 2 other very well qualified candidates, and I think we'll interview a couple more, and then we'll have to make a decision in a couple of weeks. Also attended the CSA Summit test. It seemed to have gone well, voting and everything. So that's all I was able to work in during this last couple of weeks. I left after the last board meeting. We got home on Saturday night.
Right. Supervisor Simmons?
Attended a few of the, like I said, online meetings. Attended the Mohawk Irrigation District Board meeting. Had a meeting with some of the Yuma East board members reference to traffic issues, kind of what's coming with our new plan as far as traffic calming measures and stuff, and they are very excited about that. Had Chris with me too.
They will be until they have to drive over them.
Oh, I don't think they'll have a problem with it. Met with Far West Water, and I believe they've gotten a hold of Paul, and they're going to participate in that U of A study as well out in the foothills. So hopefully that went through. Attended a couple of meet and greets at Bernardo's and Jimmy K's, and I think that's about it.
Supervisor Porteous?
I was part of the Forefront at ED meeting, the regional meeting. It was interesting to hear what mayor from Mexicali is doing, the mayor from Calexico, and also a mayor from El Centro, and our mayors here within our county. So it was a very nice and very informative meeting. So it went good.
I agree.
I have okay, thank you. I have a question. Normally the canvassing after the election happens sometimes a week or 10 days. Or is there any? Are we scheduled to have it on the 16th of November, or is it simply not in the agenda because we don't know when it's supposed to be done? That's a question for scheduling. I mean, normally we have a special meeting and we canvass the results of the election. Sometime, I don't know, a week, 10 days, or there must be some statutory requirement we canvass at a particular time and date. Do you?
Yes, that we'll let you know as soon as it's been scheduled. But yeah, it's just usually a special meeting to canvass the votes.
Okay. The announcement yesterday that the restrictions to cross the border for non-essential travelers has been suspended for another month wasn't unexpected. It's just that it seems to me we don't really have any real statistic or guideline. It just, it depends on how they feel, I suppose. And it's something that we brought forth. Mayor of San Luis has made a statement about it. I've made plenty of statements about it. We've communicated about it. It doesn't seem to make any difference. This is made, I guess the decision is made by Homeland Security and the Mexican Secretaría de Relaciones Exteriores, which is the State Department. I'm still looking forward to actually reading something that makes sense about it. But I'll let you know as soon as I know. That's it for me. Susan?
You remember.
This is it.
Yes, during the county administrators meeting last Friday, we did preview and have our own discussion about the various proposals. And the one, it seems like the one from Pinal County that relates to vehicle allowances for supervisors they had a split on their board to proceed with it. It was 3-2. So there's not a whole lot of support. The county administrators are not in favor of a car allowance because then it opens a can of worms for all other elected officials and the dollars get pretty big pretty fast. CSA has done a little chart assuming different levels of car allowance for supervisors only, for other elected officials, so it's a very costly thing, and it doesn't seem like it really was well thought out. But I think one person in particular in Pinal County really is pushing this. So it does have quite a dollar amount, and I'm not sure how. One of my comments during our meeting was, I'm not sure that CSA wants to use its political capital, limited political capital, for something is really not very well supported within CSA, and might get the legislators upset with counties wanting to pay themselves more money. So I think it's really not a good use of our time to pursue that. I just wanted to share my input with you on that particular item because it does cost quite a bit and it doesn't seem like there's really any rationale for it. We reimburse on mileage and certainly want to treat people fairly when they are using their vehicles. So that's all my report. Thank you.
All right.
I just want to make a real quick comment too. I appreciate too, I've been getting, I don't know if you guys get the phone calls I get about the libraries, not allowing them to come in and browse through the libraries themselves. And I noticed, I think today, that goes into effect that people can go in and browse
30 minutes.
And look through the books and stuff. And that, like I said, it's a step. But I get a ton of phone calls from people complaining about that.
And it's one of those. It's one of those things that I think people just can't adapt to. The situation we're going through. I mean, it's like wearing a mask. It's something that just people refuse to. My original position was that the county should be open, right? We're asking businesses to open, so why shouldn't we be open, right? And the fact of the matter is that, we are setting a precedent, by opening up, and other people will follow that. And the libraries, to me, are a place where people like to congregate, to spend some time and get together. And so there's pretty stringent rules you know, of how long you can stay in it, so on and so forth, that I think are gonna make people, once they get in, they're gonna make people uncomfortable. You need to get in and get out. So this browsing thing, when I hear the word browsing, I go like, okay, well, this is not the type of, you know, activity that you do during a pandemic inside a, you know, a building, browsing.
That's right.
So, you know, you go to the movies to browse at the movies, but there's separation in there. So I have mixed feelings about this. I think that I just want to, I want to be, the last message that I want to give people right now about the pandemic is that we're not over that. You know, we're still in it. And yes, we will make every effort possible to get businesses back on, you know, you know, back to work and stuff. But we have to be cognizant of the fact that if we have another upsurge, it's going to get worse because,
Just
you
to
know,
clarify, we're not changing the requirements for face masks, the distancing requirement. The 30 minutes browsing is still within those safe parameters, people, and it's limited metered entrance. So only a certain number of people can be in the building at one time. So none of those have gone away. It's just the opportunity to actually go look for a book that you haven't pre-identified or a material. And I think that's a good, reasonable approach. And they're going to be monitoring it to see how it goes. But we're trying to balance providing access to people who want it and need it with safeties. And I think it's a good balance.
I have a
all right.
question about the computer use.
I mean, people touching computers is like, you know, and then somebody else coming after them. You know, there's going to have to be some pretty stringent cleaning procedures
Yeah,
and
the
things like
hotel I
that.
was at, they closed their business center. You know,
Yeah, they
so
don't.
couldn't
I mean,
keep up with
can't. Yeah,
cleaning
people
it.
just touch. I mean, it's like going to a casino, right? I'm not gonna get into that. My wife is gonna get it. Like,
See, you guys
I
are
have
lucky.
a
You got
question
one.
for Susan. Susan, that letter that I think we all received from our our
Oh,
neighbor here,
Jimmy D's.
are you gonna address it or when?
I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it?
Either.
Well, it says, it's probably in your box.
Could you forward it to me? I have not seen it.
Oh, I mean,
Oh, it's in the mail? Okay.
yeah, it's probably in the mail.
Okay. I'll take a look
Oh,
at it.
what was it?
It'll be in my box, and I haven't been here, yeah.
It's, they're requesting a few spaces over, that are county spaces, so they can open up an outside dining
should-
or
yeah.
facility,
An outside area,
outside area.
That's too bad we didn't put that on today's agenda.
I know.
Well, I think,
It just came in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, anything we can help them to open.
yeah.
As long as they don't do it during business hours. I mean,
Well, I think that's when,
so he wants to do a restaurant?
No, they have to,
No.
have to put up like fences.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, you should probably put this on your next agenda if you want to talk about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, okay, all right. Do we get free drinks?
We just talk about it now.
No, we can't talk about it.
We can't talk about getting free drinks? Kid.
You gavel the meeting closed, yes.
Come on.
All right, so are we done?
Yes.
All right, so we're done. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.